Good morning, America. Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network. As I'm sure you might be locked in with snow and ice, so we wish you the best and that you're healthy and happy during this time of the snowpocalypse. And we should have some great coverage from a chief meteorologist coming in relatively soon to talk about what happened down here in the southeast, because it's rather amazing that Alabama, seemingly the only state in the deep south that really did not have any serious amount of ice and snow. Plenty of rain, some tornado watches in eastern Alabama down through southwest Georgia, but the ice all throughout this great country of ours. Over or nearly 1 million Americans losing power in this process. So as we have coverage today of Karoline Leavitt holding a press briefing in roughly 2 hours from now that will be in the early afternoon at 1 o'clock Eastern. We have a big show lined up for you on the issues of the day. So before we dive more into the weather, an unfortunate situation happening over the weekend with the ICE-involved shooting and the potential fallout from that, and whether it will be a federal or local investigation, mix of the two. We do know that there are sides pulling back and forth for this. My own personal take, it's been interesting to read a number of different comments and also study the law and the precedent that has been set when it comes to these types of engagements. And first and foremost, something that did strike me was that these are all preventable tragedies. There's no question about that. It doesn't matter right, left, and center. In fact, there's really no both sides of this. No one wins in this process. But the Date Right app, if you've been familiar with that, a group of folks from the first Trump administration putting that together for those conservative Americans out there looking to date, putting this statement out on a number of different names and some names that you may have never known. So, of course, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, preventable tragedies, yes. And we're seeing the manufactured crisis coming from the left in what I view as a George Floyd 2.0 situation happening in the very same city of Minneapolis, Minnesota. But what else was preventable throughout all of this? Open borders. The last administration administered with Alejandro Mayorkas as their chief at DHS to open our land up to Trende Aragua and criminal gangs, and prisons emptied from some of the worst areas throughout Central and South America, coming into this country to not only traffic human beings, but drug paraphernalia and victims in this country who should have not lost their lives. Like Breonna Kelson, Karen Diamond, Billy McKellar, Zabar McKellar, Krishawn McKellar, Kason McKellar, Nicole Gregory, Larisha Sherelle Thompson, Jimmy Frischenhan, also Ava Moore, Jorge Gonzalez, Alexandre Mombazde, Camelia Williams, Jim McCammon, Lesbia Milith Ramirez Guerra, Ilias, Louis Mavros, Aiden Lopez Lorenzo, Matias Roberlo Emmanuel, Debrina Kawam, Grayson Christopher Davis, Angel Samaniego, Evangeline Ubaldo Moreno, Sebastian Ubaldo Moreno, Frame Ubaldo, Tiger Gutierrez, Rylan Onkale, Talia Crochet, Melody Waldecker, Caitlin Weaver, Jocelyn Nungary, we know her name very well, Scott Miller, Matthew Carney, Christy Thibodeau, Laken Riley from Georgia, Shannon Patricia Jungworth, Riodon Powell, Melissa Powell, Travis Wolf, Cantalina Valdez Andrade, Merced Andrade Bailon, Roberto Salgaldo, Michael Kunovich, Jose Jonathan Cesares, Daniel Enrique Lasso, Mateo Garcia, Diane Hill Luckett, Maria Rios, Ned Bird, Kayla Marie Hamilton, Terry Altman, Aaron Simanskis, Rachel Morin. We know Rachel's name very well. George Levin, Maria Gonzalez, Haley Helgeson, Santiago Chicapado, Christopher God, Paul Osakin, Christopher God, Dennis Bawn, Corbin Wagner, and Victoria Eileen Harwell. Just some of the names listed and put out there by this group. And they continue to say that one group deliberately put themselves in danger by threatening police officers. No question about that. It's not a right, left, or center issue. These people were impeding police officers. Renee Good and Alex Pettit. The others include some of the actual victims, people who were harmed by illegal aliens and immigrants who were not supposed to be in this country at all, who violated Title VIII standards, those very same laws that Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, and also Greg Bavino are attempting to every day with brave uniformed officers in these chilling temperatures to enforce that law, something that local leaders in Minneapolis and throughout Minnesota refuse to do. Yet the left directs its outrage selectively, and the hypocrisy is both exhausting and truly morally bankrupt. And regardless, again, whoever is on right, left, or center of this issue, we pray for the families and the victims in all of these situations. But it's smart to start with the letter of the law. The reasonableness of a particular use of force, and this is actually from Graham versus O'Connor, must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, rather than with the 20/20 vision of hindsight. Now, the calculus of reasonableness must embody allowance for the fact that police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments. In certain circumstances, they are tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving about the amount of force that is necessary in a particular situation. That again, Graham versus O'Connor. Now, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in May that the totality of circumstances must be considered in these types of cases. The case in Barnes versus Felix is very important here. To quote that, an excessive force claim under the Fourth Amendment must be evaluated based on the totality of the circumstances, not solely the moment an officer perceives a threat. Now, Justice Elena Kagan, so Obama appointee, authored the unanimous opinion of the court which vacated and remanded the Fifth Circuit's ruling that had applied a narrower moment of threat analysis. To quote her on this case, the Fourth Amendment's objective reasonableness standard requires a fact-specific contextual examination of all relevant circumstances leading up to a law enforcement officer's use of force. While the moment of the officer firing a weapon may often carry significant weight, events occurring before that instant, such as the initiation of a stop or earlier contact or conduct of the parties, may affect how a reasonable officer would have perceived the situation. Prior actions by either the officer or suspect may clarify ambiguous behaviors or shift how threatening a situation reasonably appeared, making a strict focus on only the climactic moment inconsistent with established Fourth Amendment jurisprudence. So it's very important to watch this as it all plays out, because sadly, I think since 2014, we have something that's very similar to what's known as the Ferguson effect, also after the Laquan McDonald shooting in Chicago, Illinois. And each and every case should be treated as separate with legal precedent. That's very important here, rather than emotion running wild. There's a very good book that I'm actually going to reread, brought in with me today, is 13 Days in Ferguson. This is the memoir of Captain Ronald Johnson, who was there, and to read the backlog of it. On August 14th of 2014, 5 days after the fatal shooting of Michael Brown ignited riots throughout the city of Ferguson, Missouri, the nation found an unlikely hero, Captain Ron Johnson of the Missouri State Highway Patrol. Charged with the Herculean task of restoring peace between an angry African-American community, local police, Johnson, a 30-year law enforcement veteran and a black American, did the unthinkable. He took off his bulletproof vest and walked with protesters, stating, "I see both sides." Now, the days and nights that followed were some of the most trying of Johnson's life. And to think, if you remember back at that moment, how frightening that would have been for a police officer to do that, considering the falsehoods that were running through the protest that turned very, very violent. Now, professionally, emotionally, spiritually, he went through a lot there. And officers in his own command called him a traitor. Lifelong friends stopped speaking to him. The media even questioned his every decision. But alone at the center of the firestorm, with his own family and faith to cling on to, Mr. Johnson preserved his belief that the only way to effectively bridge the divide between black and blue is to literally walk across the lines. As he said, "I see both sides." In 13 Days in Ferguson, Johnson recaps and shares what he saw and what happened during the turbulent days he spent stabilizing the city of Ferguson, Missouri, and the extraordinary impact those 2 historic weeks had on his faith and his approach to leadership, and how he perceives the most viable solution is to the issues of what may be racism and prejudice in America. But there shouldn't be sides, as he mentioned. And if we look back to the founding of this country, it's legend and some historical recording of this, that when the Boston Tea Party leading up to, the Boston Massacre, actually, where John Adams actually represented per British common law, which then led to what we have in our foundational Republican government, Republican meaning a nation of laws. He represented those British soldiers, and many of those Boston commoners saw that as some form of betrayal. But they took it to court. They settled those before judge and jury, as our system calls for in Article 3. Even his own cousin, Samuel Adams, said, "This is harming the movement, John." And he said, "But those men's lives are in the crosshairs." That is the standard we have to live up to in 250 years of this great country. And being someone who's been involved in politics, media, as an actor, I had the privilege of working on Chicago PD with amazing retired and active police officers, to hear their stories, to see what they actually go through on a daily basis. I think it's very important to make sure that we look through every single fact that goes into this and allow investigations to take place, and not to use passion and heated rhetoric to get to the bottom of it. We've learned that from the Ferguson effect. As Karoline Leavitt will hold a press briefing roughly at 1 o'clock Eastern. That's what we have for you today. We look forward to all of that on a number of different issues, as we see that the Democrats seem to not want to fund the government yet once again over this very issue having taken place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll watch that very closely as the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, sending another bundle to the Senate, very similar to the One Big Beautiful Bill, about half the size of that, but with 6 funding bills really wrapped up into one. So we might have breaking news on where that stands in the Senate as we break down all of the news for today. I also do believe that Pastor Josh Howerton had a very good statement regarding everything that took place over the course of the weekend, and calling on Christians to take the time to learn and reflect before they just emotionally react. Because when emotion gets high, logic gets low, and that's a very true statement. To quote Proverbs, "He who states his case first seems right until another comes and examines him." And for many people arguing about this issue, it's been a Second Amendment issue. For me, I don't believe it is a Second Amendment issue. Although not a lawyer, I'm just someone very interested in the process and dialogue over these things. In Minnesota, allegedly, you do not have to alert an officer of having a gun on your person. But is it common sense to go in and attempt to impede law enforcement when they are enacting and protecting Title VIII? The people they are removing are criminal illegal aliens who've committed drug trafficking, human trafficking, horrendous crimes, rape, and not only of adults, but of minors. And these Minnesota politicians, like Governor Tim Walz, who has cited this as being the same thing as the Diary of Anne Frank, and that a story will be written like this that's very similar. How insulting to the Jewish community and to world history. And to, mind you, 6 million Jews that were exterminated by Nazi Germany. There's no comparison. So the Gestapo and the Nazi language needs to stop immediately. But as we watch all of this, we will continue to break it down with thanks to our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. All Family Pharmacy is the place to go for Tamiflu. I hope you have that now, especially with all of the snow and cold, the ice that will prevent you from getting outside and to stay off the road. So important in this time as we go through this megastorm. The pharmacy that supports your medical freedom and is changing online pharmacies for the better. allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. Use code RSBN10. Scan that QR code there now for ivermectin, antibiotics, antivirals, maintenance meds, and much, much more. Even, in fact, 300 essential medications, including emergency medical kits that are quite fantastic to have on hand. And you could travel with them, as we had roughly 17,000 plus flights canceled over the course of this weekend. About 4,000 today. Some by the nearby close large airport by us, Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta, Georgia. But it seems as if, per Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, it'll be back up and running come Wednesday in full capacity. But in the meantime, get those online meds now. allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN, code RSBN10 for all of your medical freedom. Scan that QR code there now. Also, Kalshi.com/RSBN. All of the great sports and music, culture and politics, and much, much more. Literally any question in the American experiment can be traded on and bet on at Kalshi.com/RSBN, including that Super Bowl coming up February 8th. And that's going to be just a little short of 2 weeks from now. In case you watched last night, the Championship Sunday. Talk about a snowstorm in Denver. Mr. Producer's Patriots going on after defeating the Denver Broncos 10-7. And then, of course, the home of the 12, the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, what amount of noise in that stadium, perhaps the loudest in the country, taking home that George Halas Trophy, which I was hoping to go to my Chicago Bears, but they fell short to those Los Angeles Rams before the competition yesterday. So a great 31-27 victory, Seattle over Los Angeles, who will win Super Bowl 60 in San Francisco, California. Bring in your bets and all your trades at Kalshi.com/RSBN. So as we break down the news of the day, we also have an interview from last week with my colleague Matthew Alvarez and the great Michael Kunzler, the co-owner of All Family Pharmacy. If that's ready to run, Mr. Producer, be happy to do that. And we will toss it over to you now about all those great savings you can get with these truly life-saving medications.
Joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Definitely. All right. So there's a lot of efficiency and all the things that make it happen where it goes from A to B quickly with your guys' company. But this is awesome. Can you talk to us about the different emergency kits that you have? I mean, ibuprofen, all the things are in here.
Yeah. So the first one, which I believe you have in your hand now, is the flu virus kit, right? This is good for any type of viral infection, whether it's influenza, it could be a numerous of different viral infections. We have Tamiflu, 75 milligrams. The one thing people don't understand with Tamiflu is that it could be used in a preventative stake and it could be used in a treatment stake, right? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a pharmacist, but this is everything that we learn here on the pharmacy level that patients just don't understand is Tamiflu doesn't have to be taken only when you're sick or have influenza. If somebody in your household has the flu, you cut the dose in half. Instead of taking 2 capsules, you just take 1 capsule a day for 5 to 10 days, depending on, that phase of time that you're close to somebody that's sick. So 1 capsule a day for 5 days is usually suffice. It'll help prevent you from getting the flu or influenza. If you happen to contract the flu, traditionally the symptoms aren't as worse because you already have the medication in your body fighting the virus. That's one cool thing about Tamiflu, and it's been around for ages. And it's super cheap generic drug that doctors don't like to talk about too much. They'd rather just you go to the pharmacy and get a flu vaccine that doesn't even work, as they've all stated. Then we have ibuprofen 800 milligrams. That's obviously for fever, aches, body aches, chills. Get you 30 tablets. It's plenty to get you through any type of viral infection. Then we have the Medrol dose pack. That's any type of fluid in the lungs, heavy congestion. That is a steroid pack. So, you do have to wean off the steroid pack, but it's an awesome tool to have. Then we have the Tessalon Pearls. Tessalon Pearls are for dry cough or any type of sore throat associated with a viral infection, which is neat. Most doctors during COVID, that's literally the only thing they wanted to prescribe was Tessalon Pearls. Why? I don't understand. I mean, they're great to have for a sore throat or for a cough, but if you got fluid in your lungs, it's not helping you. It's only going to help kind of suppress the cough. My favorite, Flonase. Flonase is a steroid for your nasal cavity, kind of open up and allow the congestion to flow out. Reduce the inflammation in your nasal cavities, best used for sinus infections or any viral infections. And then the last one's an albuterol inhaler. Albuterol inhaler is what we call a rescue inhaler. Shortness of breath, wheezing, the albuterol inhaler will open up your lungs. Most people needed that during COVID when they had that wheezing or that shortness of breath. That was very popular in COVID, and for whatever reasons, doctors didn't want to prescribe it. But on a lot of our patients, we informed them that it's definitely something to have in their cabinet just in case. So all of these medications are to help subside the effects of any type of viral infection or influenza infection.
This is pretty awesome. This right here packs a punch, but then how long? So is it about 30 days? You have about a month's supply here? Is that, am I reading that right?
Well, that's probably, I would say, more of a 7-day protocol. Most viruses are 7 days. The Tamiflu, if you're using it in a prevention, it could last up to 10 days. Traditionally speaking, you only want it for 5 days for an acute infection. Tessalon Pearls, we give you 40 pearls. That's enough for, 10, 20 days. Sometimes people have that lingering effect. One of the things I wanted to add to our flu virus kit, which I'm going to go over, just quickly, is NAD+. We've been encouraging a lot of our patients who come to us, specifically walk-ins, and we tell them, they're fatigued, they're beat up from the flu, they can't get out of bed. Try NAD+. NAD+ has that factor to beat fatigue. We have a couple people that have come in a couple days after their flu, and they're like, I feel great again. I'm back to normal. There is no lag between my virus infection. Something that you could add to your order if you'd like. You just got to give us a call. We can definitely add it. It's going to help with the fatigue factor. People are taking it in that long COVID regimen because long COVID causes tons of fatigue, brain fog. We can get you that mental clarity back. So that's something awesome to try too.
That's awesome. So these kits, there's not just the flu kit. I've seen that there's this sinus infection kit, a travel emergency kit, and then a ton of other options. I went to the website the other day, allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits, and I saw a whole slew of these bad boys. This is pretty awesome.
Yeah. We have a lot of kits, emergency kit, travel kit. I like the travel kit, especially now we're coming up to March. I have a family cruise. People like to go on cruises. People like to go on high altitude skiing. People like to do a lot of traveling. You're on different airplanes. We have anywhere from, ibuprofen for maybe you enjoyed your night a little too much the night before and you have a headache the next morning. We got ibuprofen for that. Some people get aches and pains on airplanes when they're doing a 3 to 6 hour flight. We have scopolamine patches, which are anti-nausea patches. Some people use those on airplanes, and most people use them on cruise ships or when they're out on a boat. Maybe they're going fishing or they're doing some exploring. Omeprazole for acid reflux. Sometimes we like to enjoy some of our favorite foods that have a little too much acid in there. And then the azithromycin, in case you are in Mexico and you drink the water, or in case you wake up with a sinus infection or any type of secondary bacteria infection, you have an antibiotic on hand that you could start, and it's not going to ruin your vacation.
I like how these kits are also compact. I've seen some other ones out there. They're just big and bulky. This fits perfectly in, if you are traveling for the travel kit, or just having one in the pantry or wherever you would store your medications, of course. And I hear that ordering is pretty simple too. You choose your kit online, and then what happens from there? Is it a licensed doctor handles everything from there?
Yes. So we abide by all state and federal laws when it comes to physicians prescribing medications. So what you'll do is when you fill out a medical form, it's going to go to a physician who is licensed in your state. As long as the pharmacy is licensed in your state, we can also provide you that service, which we are licensed in most states. Our doctors are licensed in every single state. They'll provide you a consultation. Depending upon what is needed will depend on, the doctor and the patient. We allow them to kind of do their own thing, but they understand why you're coming to All Family Pharmacy and why you're having a consultation with them. You're looking for medications to put in your cabinet for the flu, or, for just in case, or maybe you're looking to travel a little bit and you want some drugs in your suitcase to have. One of the neat things about this kit that we've provided right now is we provide prescription labels on everything. It's TSA certified, so if there's a liquid in there, you don't have to worry about that with TSA. There's a prescription on every vial, so you could put it in a handheld bag, you could put it in a carry-on, or you could put it in your checked-away suitcase. The one thing I always mention with airplane rides, depending on where you're flying to, is some of these cold places, especially with these winter storms. You don't want the medication to be susceptible to those cold temperatures, especially when it's underneath the airplane. It can be. So sometimes it's best to have it in a carry-on on your lap where the air conditioning is running at a 70-degree temperature, and we're not freezing or harming any of the medications.
Definitely. I mean, that winter storm on the way is not a time to be putting things underneath an airplane if you're traveling at all. Even if you can get off the ground, I mean, it's going to be quite the storm. Speaking of the storm, sometimes people panic when they get sick. But with you guys, you always talk about how this is all about preparation and not panic. Can you elaborate on that finally?
Yeah. So again, we have freedom thinking physicians. These doctors want you to be prepared for the next event, right? That next event could be COVID. It could be the flu. It could be a sinus infection. It could be, a family trip that you plan for spring break because your kids are off work or off school or you're off work. So these doctors understand what the need is for the patient and why we're doing this. Your traditional PCP doctor is not going to prescribe you scopamine patches 3 months in advance because you're going on a cruise, throughout the entire Caribbean. That's just kind of the way the world has worked in the medicine realm. Here at All Family Pharmacy, our physicians want you to enjoy life. They want to give you the opportunity to hold these medications as long as they're safe and effective for you. They still have to go the route of checking medical ailments, making sure no drug-to-drug interactions happen. That is something that they're very good at. But at the same time, if they approve that prescription, you're good to go. We'll get you the kit, within 1 to 4 business days, depending upon how fast you need it. But again, like this winter storm is hitting, it's going to be bad. Shipping's going to be delayed. And these are times why we always encourage our patients or people who would like to be a patient of All Family Pharmacy to be prepared, be a step ahead of this. This winter storm is not only going to delay our packages going to our patients, it's going to delay the drugs coming to us, the medications coming from our wholesalers. It's going to delay a lot of certain processes that might take a little bit longer than just a few days to get back in. So it's something to always be prepared for.
Michael, you bring up a really great point. If someone is under the weather, they're feeling that flu bug or whatever when it comes to feeling sick, and then there's a foot of snow outside, you can't travel. And that's why having one of these on hand would be great. So it's allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits. You see that information there on your screen. And can you get the RSBN 10% off on this too, or no?
Yeah, so actually what we'll do, since we're live on the air, is we're going to do a RSBN 20 for all the kits. We're going to give you 20% off a kit. This is the time, February, March, huge travel months, time to go skiing, time to go on a cruise, time to enjoy time off with your kids when they're on spring break. So we're going to offer 20% off any single one of those kits that we have on our website. It's RSBN 20. So yeah, just go to allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN and then just select the emergency kit tab, and it'll bring you to the different kits that we offer based on what your need is.
So throughout the day, throughout this broadcast, you're saying I should say RSBN 20, not RSBN 10, correct?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it for the rest of the week. Do it till Sunday. RSBN 20, we'll give them 20% off. It's a time for people to save a little bit of money, but be prepared up front. We want them to have the medication when they need it the most.
That's awesome. The owner of All Family Pharmacy, Michael Kunzler. Thanks so much, sir, for all of your time, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank you again to Michael Kunzler and Matthew Alvarez for that great interview from last week regarding all of those life-saving medications and discounts at allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. At 1 o'clock Eastern, Karoline Leavitt, the superstar, the press secretary for President Trump, giving a press briefing on the news of the day and this large FEMA response to a rather perplexing and difficult winter storm. And our chief meteorologist joins us, Christina Loren. Always great to see you, and give us some rundown, as you shared with us some pictures from Nashville, Tennessee, and all that ice that's out there. I was reading somewhere, I can't believe this, that even half an inch of ice stuck on the power grid, those wires outside, can be the same force of about 500 pounds. So it's amazing to think that 1 million people without power right now.
I was surprised that you nailed that 500-pound statistic, Bobby. That's a good one. And it's true. And it's actually all it takes is a quarter of an inch of ice. And we saw it play out. I think a lot of people are kind of sitting back now and waiting for, how historic was the storm? Well, we've seen a lot of these weather phenomena before. A foot of snow, not out of the ordinary in New England. This ice this time of year in Texas is not completely unheard of. But what was so interesting about this storm was it was sprawling, and it impacted 40 of our great 50 states. And so many of us right now are kind of stuck inside. Me, for example. I don't know if you can show the picture, but if you look outside my window right now, it's like a winter wonderland. You can see, though, what happens when that ice accumulates on these leaves and the branches themselves, and then the branches snap under the weight, because then you get the wind that picks up as well. So it was an interesting weather setup. I haven't seen anything like it before. I think many of us dodged a bullet, and we're happy about it. My heart goes out to everybody who did lose power. I can't imagine how hard that must be with pets and kids. But we'll get through it. And President Trump has shown that every time we have a major disaster like this, he shows up. He's on the ground. He wants to help people. And there's a lot of relief that comes from that as well.
Oh, yes. And I think that the architecture a little bit down and different in the Deep South and the Southeastern Conference that seemed to, if you look at that map, really having that ice. And is that really what's dangerous right now, Christina, more than the chilly temperatures, rather the ice on the ground, as FEMA's encouraging people to stay at home if they can, unless they really have to go out if necessary?
That's it. And you want to keep those roadways open for emergency crews to get out there and to be able to bring power back up for so many people. You don't want to become another incident for them. And, a lot of all-terrain vehicles, you look outside, you think, that looks kind of fun. Now I want to go for a drive. But the better choice is to stay inside, stay warm, because we do have this bitter cold snap. It's going to last for a few days, and then finally we'll thaw out, and it'll feel a lot more like January typically does around the country. But you know what, Bobby, I have to talk about this because it's infuriating to me to think that the mayor of Minneapolis would allow his people to go out on the streets to protest in conditions like this. Because if you think it was bad here in Nashville, it was. But at the time of the incident, the most recent shooting that everybody keeps talking about, it wouldn't have happened if the mayor would have kept everybody inside like he should have. Negative 47-degree wind chills. Negative 47 degrees. And when you think about a setup like Minneapolis, you think about cold air when it's freezing cold and you're out there and you're just trying to use your phone, it becomes more difficult. So you're wondering at the time, you already have this life-threatening weather. Temperatures are cold, the wind chills are picking up. You can't really function automatically the psychological response in cold weather is stress. You go into fight or flight mode. When you're letting people go out in an already hostile situation, in temperatures like this, you are setting them up for failure. And I have a real problem with the mayor of Minneapolis waking up this morning and looking at that forecast at the time. I am heartbroken to think that he could be so reckless to allow his people to go out there on the streets in temperatures like that. Our great president for the inauguration, he said, no, we're not going to do this outdoors. This is dangerous. This is inauguration. This is a big event. We don't want to have to cancel it, but I'm going to do what's right for the people. He did what's right for the people. Where's the mayor when he needs to show up for his people? I look at this man and I think, you know what? If you have any sort of political posturing, and obviously a lot of Democrats, mayors in particular right now, they do, I hope people are taking a very close look at the broader picture here, as opposed to an isolated incident that could have been avoided if he would have been responsible.
That's the most common sense I've heard on television or throughout media in about 52 hours. Thank you, Christina, because that's so true. They really are dangerous temperatures. I'm from the Chicago area, and it can dip just into those temperatures as it's happening right now. But even Minnesota, the unthinkable when it comes to that frigid wind chill. And then we have to ask those questions about why are you out there blowing whistles? Why are you trying to cause confusion even last night, breaking into the hotel areas where they were pepper sprayed once again. But sadly, it becomes, or it would not be much of a headline, I believe, if it was in the reverse and a police officer was shot. So our thoughts and prayers with everyone involved in this situation. There shouldn't be, I was explaining earlier on the show, there shouldn't be two sides to anything, but I think there's one very insidious side, and it's the far left, and it's led by people like Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis. Now, we've had roughly 17,000 cancellations of flights, about 4,000 today. When can we see some relief from that?
Again, your numbers right on track, Bobby. What am I here for? What am I here for? No, we're going to see things go back to normal in the next couple of days. But yeah, you're exactly right. 4,000 flights canceled just today. And I think that, the next couple of days, we're going to have a lot more opportunity for crews to get out there and clear the highways and make things safe again. And I know that you have to have commerce in the nation's capital, especially the northeast quadrant of the country. That's where a lot of commerce takes place. We've got to open it back up. And they will. This is not unusual. It was just such a sprawling storm. It impacted so many of us. And let us know in the chat, did it impact you? To what magnitude? Because I like to go back and kind of read and find out where people are located as we build forecasts going forward.
Well, and absolutely, yeah. Check out your neighbors too. I mean, that's what's great about the South, very neighborly, as we are experiencing that as Southern transplants, as I like to call it. But Christina, the history of this, when's the last time we saw a storm quite like this? Because the last time I was a Southern resident before my growing up in the Chicago area, the Woodlands, Texas, in the early 1990s, had a lot of ice. And I remember we were locked in for about 48 hours, I kid you not. It was the trees were up against the windows and the doors, and no one had ever seen anything quite like it in that subtropical climate just off the Gulf of America. But when's the last time America has seen such a sprawling storm like this?
That's going to be a microclimate based event. But if you're going to break down, say, the snowfall totals, they had to really dig to find snowfall totals to make it a historic event in New York, for example, or even in Washington, D.C. It was the worst storm in 8 years, for example, in New York. So people are trying to paint a more dramatic picture than they're able to. This one, it was just widespread and sprawling. Nothing about it was incredibly impressive, except for the amount of, I would say, power outages that we saw in Tennessee specifically. And that's because we got hit the hardest here with the ice. Texas did as well, but Tennessee is going to be the big weather story that comes out of this specific event because we got the ice, and we're talking about 1/2 of an inch, 6/10 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch in Brentwood, Tennessee, just up the road from where I'm located right now. And yeah, Williamson County schools shut down today, tomorrow, likely for the next several days as well. But kids are playing in the snow. We're having a good time now.
It's always fun to have a snow day. And apparently in New York City, they are virtually learning. So kudos to Mr. Kami Mamdani, who was out there. He was actually, with that heat island effect that they have, he was shoveling snow and helping his neighbors. So a rather, as he put it, was it the warmness or the tenderness of the collective? I guess he's actually living by his words. So I appreciate that there.
His 8 years, that was his as well. I took that right from his script, by the way. Thank you for reading so well for us, Mayor. We really appreciate you reading to us the way that you are. That guy has not proven himself to be impressive on any level at this point to me. Now, I'll stand by and continue to gauge from afar, but you should be able to speak without the prompter if you're going to be the mayor of New York City, greatest city in the United States of America, the greatest country in the world. So I'm hoping he loses that prompter eventually, but I'm not impressed based on what I've seen so far, Bobby.
I think he might be the leader of the new Democrat socialist movement, but we will see what happens in 2026 and 2028. Before we let you go, Christina, your area of the country will be big for the midterms. Anything on the ground there that you're seeing that might lean the direction for the House to be retained by Republicans and the Senate as well? We know Marsha Blackburn, a longtime Congresswoman in the House and the Senate side, running for governor. Tell us some developments on the political side of the volunteer state.
I think Marsha Blackburn, who I've had the luxury, the privilege of having a chance to bake with her in her kitchen. That's how wonderful she is. And while we're watching Fox News, by the way, it's a special memory I'm never going to forget. She's going to be fine. She's beloved here. People love her here. I think we've got to look at the midterms as a big 10,000 foot level picture. And I really look at it in the way that President Trump needs every single Republican that he can get in Congress. And it's so important for every single American, wherever you live, no matter what color you think your state normally goes, you have to get out there and vote in the midterms. And I really think, Bobby, if President Trump can figure out a way to turn housing around, it could come down to something as simple as that, is housing. Figure out a way to turn the housing market around. He's tried with interest rates. He's trying now with 401k money, allowing people to use that for a down payment on a home without being penalized, for an early penalization like you normally take. He's looking at a 50-year mortgage. He's looking at everything that he can possibly do to spur the housing market, because that's where we're locked up right now. You look at gas prices, they've come down considerably. Interest rates themselves have come down. Things are looking up, but housing has to improve. And if it doesn't improve quickly, I don't think that we have as great of a chance. We need to win. They will impeach him. They will impeach him. It cannot happen again. We need to win, and everybody needs to come together for this.
And I think that was a key thing missed over the last several days with what's been engulfing the news cycle, from the storm to the ICE-involved shooting in Minneapolis. The fact that you have President Trump really going after those big three, especially BlackRock. He wants this country to own land. We're literally built on home ownership and having land of our own. It's really in the foundation and the beginnings of this great nation of ours, now celebrating America 250. Classy Christina Loren, always wonderful to have you on the show. I miss being out there with you in the field, but might have an opportunity to do that in the midterms here. You have a great day. Stay warm, stay safe, and let us know if we can talk again soon about another crazy storm system. God willing, that's the last one for a while.
I'd love to, Bobby. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
And as we break down the latest news here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, roughly an hour or so from now, scheduled for 1 o'clock Eastern, we'll have Karoline Leavitt, the press secretary, coming right to you into your homes from the West Wing in the James S. Brady briefing room. Thank you to angelpaste.com/RSBN. That miracle cream, I use it every day, and it's nice this time of year, but really year-round, for a non-GMO, non-chemical miracle cream, vitamin B infused to keep that skin glowing. Also, the orange option, vitamin C infused, a great Maha option instead of what might be out there at a local pharmacy, local store, and then you read, and those dyes are still there. Although so many companies turning the tide and the pages on those deadly chemicals. Experience the miracle that is angelpaste.com. They are Christian-owned. They hire veterans. They're based out of Spring, Texas, not far from the Woodlands I just mentioned, outside of the Houston Metroplex, where you have many wonderful people living, actually a top 4 community in the entire country. So enjoy that there. They, again, hire veterans. They are Christian-owned. They love America. It's the miracle that is angelpaste.com. Thank you for showcasing and sponsoring us here on the right side of history. Also, this whole AI war, the race for space, the race into the future as technologies continue to develop. Venice.ai/RSBN leading the way on protecting your privacy, whether it be a phone conversation, to text messages, to the written word on your email. Now through the App Store and Google Play, 20% off with code RSBN, 20, a big 20% off with code RSBN. Venice.ai/RSBN, as Vice President J.D. Vance mentioning recently that we don't have to fear the AI race, but rather use that. And this is a great way to protect yourself online. Venice.ai/RSBN. Again, Karoline Leavitt holding that press briefing a little bit over 1 hour from now. Let's break down some of those elements and what the president's been saying recently on a whole host of topics, as he had a very successful trip to the World Economic Forum just last week. And with that, we have a number of different things to look at from what he's been talking about on countless different issues. As we bring that up, we are about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. We'll take a quick commercial break for sponsorships here on the right side of history. It's Right Side Broadcasting Network in this winter wonderland. As Christina said, 40 states, a big 40, affected by this winter storm. And we hope you're staying warm and safe in your neck of the woods. But in the meantime, President Trump building on top of everything else that I am doing, one of the greatest, most beautiful ballrooms anywhere in the world. We're excited about that, with more than $300 million of great American patriot money, and working closely with, right from the beginning, the United States military and the Secret Service. This is a gift, zero taxpayer funding to the United States of America of $300 to $400 million, depending on the scope and quality of the interior finished, for a desperately needed space sought for over 150 years by previous presidents and administrations, so that the White House would no longer be forced to use a cheap and unsafe tent for big, important state events, dinners and meetings, conferences, and already scheduled future inaugurations. So for safety, security, capacity purposes on a very wet and subject to weather White House lawn, making such a large gift to the United States of America was thought to be, by almost everyone, a wonderful thing to do. But no, as usual, I got sued, and this time by the radical left National No Trust for Historic Preservation, a group that could not care less about our country and all the structural steel, windows, doors, and the AC heating and the equipment that's going to that. They could care less, as President Trump going on with that very long post on Truth Social regarding that. And here's some interesting background with all of that. The American White House, it's about 5,000 square feet for the actual middle of that executive mansion. This will be 9,000 square feet, so almost doubling the size. But President Trump stating that the equipment, marble, stone, and precast concrete, bulletproof windows and glass, anti-drone roofing, and much, much more has been ordered or is ready to be. And there is no practical or reasonable way to go back. It's too late. Why didn't these obstructionists and troublemakers bring their baseless lawsuit much earlier? Congress never tried to or wanted to stop the ballroom project. Everyone knew what was taking place at the White House, a great, big, beautiful gift to the United States of America. And for those that are interested, the tiny East Wing was so bastardized and changed, built and rebuilt over the years that it bore no resemblance or relationship to the original building. The so-called preservationists who got their money from the most unusual of places should not be allowed to stop the desperately needed addition to our great White House, a place that the president has never needed permission to change or enhance because of the special grounds on which it sits, no matter how big and important that enhancement may be. Additionally, in this instance, it is being done per the consent and approval of the highest levels of the military and the Secret Service. And, did we not mention, this is all done through private funding. And the changes that have been happening to the modern White House have been since the 26th President of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt, who began construction on that West Wing as we see it today. In fact, as President Trump mentioned before he went to Davos, Switzerland, with that White House presser last week, that this James S. Brady briefing room was a swimming pool at one point. So it does change over time, and that should not change this situation, as it will make it even more beautiful and better for future Republican and Democrat administrations. So everyone benefits. With cut number 2, Mr. Producer, President Trump requesting certain things to happen now in Minnesota as a result of the ICE-involved shooting that took place on Saturday morning. That is why I hereby calling on Governor Walz, Mayor Frey, and every Democrat governor and mayor in the United States of America to formally cooperate with the Trump administration to enforce our nation's laws rather than resist and stoke the flames of division, chaos, and violence. Governor Walz and Mayor Frey should turn over all criminal illegal aliens that are currently incarcerated in their state prisons and their jails to federal authorities, along with all illegal criminals with an active warrant or known criminal history for immediate deportation. Number 2, state and local law enforcement must agree to turn over all illegal aliens arrested by local police. Number 3, local police must assist federal law enforcement in apprehending and detaining illegal aliens who are wanted for those crimes. Number 4, Democrat politicians must partner with the federal government to protect American citizens in the rapid removal of all criminal illegal aliens in our country. Some Democrats in places like Memphis, Tennessee, or Washington, D.C. have done so, resulting in safer streets for all. In addition, I am hereby calling on the United States Congress to immediately pass legislation to end sanctuary cities, which is the root cause of all these problems. American cities should be safe sanctuaries for law-abiding American citizens only, not illegal alien criminals who broke our nation's laws. All of these requests are rooted in common sense and will provide the best possible circumstances to make America great again. The Trump administration standing by and waiting for any Democrat to do the right thing and work with us on these important matters of making America safe again, like it is in all sections of our country where we are together with local leadership participating and involved. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America. And I actually have testimony to what took place in Memphis, Tennessee, a Democrat-run city. And now we're seeing, in totality, violent crime going down in amazing numbers and the lowest since really the modern era. We go back to numbers since 1900 of violent crime, and it's been because of the involvement of Border Patrol, DHS, ICE, and all federal law enforcement with their state and local partners. Now, number 2 and 3 on that list are difficult, as the president acknowledges, because you have local leaders who are their respective commanders in chief, whether it be National Guard for governors or even those municipal enforcement agents and officers, peace officers, that can be fired on a dime by people like Mayor Frey, who, like many in the woke movement, like to step into someone else's shoes and act as if they know better and how to do things more effectively than these people who have been subject matter experts or have been doing the job for years and years of years. You know, typical of politicians to claim as such. But I know people, and I won't even share the gender or ranks or even the specific division of the federal law enforcement they're involved with. But going into Memphis, Tennessee, this is the kindness of so many of these people. They stumbled upon a ring of, if you remember what Michael Vick did, which was just absolutely terrible to those different dogs, Rottweilers to pit bulls, and we're actually fighting them and breeding them really in unsanitary and unethical conditions and breeding them to be fighting dogs. They found some of that in Memphis, Tennessee. What did they do as a result? Why they were staying there in their hotels? They actually made them food. They found dogs that were starving. And that's what those police officers spent their day doing, including enforcing Title VIII and the law of the land. So not only are they helping out their fellow humans, but our canine friends who are on the street, homeless and starving, looking for a meal. That's the character of the people in the blue. That's why I'm proud to wear this pin as often as I can over my heart, because it's a thankless job and they don't get paid a lot. And although there are some bonuses happening right now for them to join these forces, and we are seeing recruitment numbers really going up and through the roof compared to the last administration, we still should offer them our thanks. And anywhere you see them, make sure you say thank you for the amazing work that they do. And thank you to mypillow.com/RSBN. The CEO, Mike Lindell, also Republican gubernatorial candidate in Minnesota. He always has the best sales. It's a mattress and topper sale as low as $99.99 plus free shipping on your entire order. So call today. Don't delay. It's 800-836-7566 with the promo code RSBN. Easy to remember. Support Mike Lindell on the right side of history. Shop now at mypillow.com/RSBN. Save with code RSBN. And like his American-made facilities right there in the great state of Minnesota, he will bring some common sense up there if elected governor, and we wish our dear friend Mike Lindell the best as he's supporting the right side of history. Thank you to mypillow.com/RSBN. Save with code RSBN. If you like what you see, we are your go-to live desk, and also that rally network gearing up for 2026, which is going to be one, as Susie Wiles has put it, putting President Trump back out on the campaign trail, even though his name is not necessarily on the top of the ballot. With those nostalgic views now of the 2024 campaign, whether it's rain, shine, snowstorm, or ice, we'll be out there to get all of the action to you and your homes, and then also interview the crowd. That's our big thing here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. You can support us at rsbnetwork.com/donate or text RSBN to 801-801. We also have an address if you'd like to send a check or money order, 1550-1550 Opelika Road, Suite 6, Box 344. It's the loveliest village on the plains with a lot of sunshine out the window today, but still bitterly cold, especially in these southern United States. Thank you for supporting us here on the right side of history. 1 hour from now at high noon, 1 o'clock, we will have the wonderful Karoline Leavitt holding a press briefing in the James S. Brady briefing room to touch on a number of the big subjects happening around the country, as we are joined by Ashley Brassfield of the Daily Caller. Love to have her 2 cents on what took place over the course of the weekend. Welcome, Ashley. I'm really trying to digest all of this because I don't like to look at it through a lens of right, left, and center. I believe there is one side. It's the far left progressives who have created this environment of George Floyd 2.0, and that's why we have an Article 3 branch of government, so this goes to the courts. It can be adjudicated. What say you about Minneapolis, Minnesota, a place where I believe there's only 2% of ICE operations and federal operations happening nationally. You know, in Texas, 25% of the national operations, and it doesn't happen down in Texas.
Right. Well, Minneapolis, obviously, and Minnesota is not a part of a border state like Texas. So, yes, you have a smaller percentage there. But really, what all sparked this? And this is the fraud and the Somali fraud that was occurring within the state. And a lot of these state leaders, including Tim Walz, Jacob Frey, Ilhan Omar, a part of the Somali community, the largely based fraud scheme that was going on. So, a lot of national attention going to that actual scandal itself. Then you saw a lot of ICE operations ramp up in the city following that. Of course, we see the killing of Nicole Good, I believe is her last name, as well as now this individual on this past weekend. But these are all agitators of ICE in this situation. As you said, it is a far left ploy to put them out on the streets to go against ICE operations happening within Minneapolis, Minnesota. Of course, this new shooting with the video evidence that we see modern day take place is showing that, there was no gun pulled. There's a lot of speculation going on. A lot of individuals, including Republicans, calling for, congressional investigations to come before panels on the House Homeland Security Committee, the DOJ to investigate. So there's a lot of questions surrounding this and the mass force that's being put into that city with ICE. And I think a lot of people speculating why is there that mass presence in places like Minneapolis, Minnesota? But there are, criminal aliens across the United States, and not just in border states, basically from the last 4 years of open borders. And we are seeing the effects of this from this time period forward.
Yes, and Fox News reporting that there are sources in DHS and throughout federal law enforcement that are seemingly frustrated about what's happened in the last 52 or so hours. President Trump sending Tom Homan to Minneapolis today, so I'm sure we'll see some of that in regards to the press conference later on with Karoline Leavitt. How do you believe this will affect funding? As I know you're watching the beat of Capitol Hill. We have House Speaker Mike Johnson really putting it into another big, beautiful bill, if you will, 6 packages into one for this funding. Democrats pledging to shut down the government again on the Senate side. What do you see developing this week?
Right. Well, Democrats have used the shooting really to go against this funding as their reasoning. They would like to see a government shutdown as they did earlier in the fall. But this kind of has stalled Congress in a lot of ways. And the, of course, GOP leadership, I think, has gotten the bad PR side of this as far as being able to say their accomplishments in that first year of President Trump's presidency, which it was the least active Congress in history of the first year of a president's term. So, I mean, Democrats would like to see this happen. We're going into the 2026 midterms. And I think that is a really interesting focus that you see this repetitively throughout the years, whether it be 2020 with the Black Lives Matter. You can go back to, the presidential election and talking about the chaos that really just erupts, and it seems like in these years, and it seems like this pattern that continuously happens. And I think the American people should pay close attention to that. It is a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of noise going on a lot of the time, but I mean, it is an election year. Democrats would like to see that government shut down so they can see Republicans not accomplish things. And I think they're going to push for this. I mean, you're looking too, the country is, swept up in this winter storm coming all across the southeast to Texas and the northeast currently. But that bill also implements under DHS lies FEMA, and a lot of that funding during this time period that will not be going to American citizens if that shutdown happens and the Democrats do not vote on that bill. So I do think it is an interesting standpoint, and it's a little different from the last shutdown for Democrats as far as PR goes. Are they going to be able to win that battle here and using this shooting to kind of implement that?
I would heed your warning, Ashley, because as the former ambassador, mayor, or chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, once said, never let a good chaos go to waste. And we see that with the Democrats, because whether people are right, left, or center, really since the foundation of both the modern American parties, Republicans have leveraged individualism. There's no question about that. But Democrats, this form of groupthink. And although they were formed by Andrew Jackson and Martin Van Buren as a response to extraordinarily corrupt New England Republicans, which sadly included arguably the 6th president of the United States, John Quincy Adams, and the banks of the time and the Fed of the time, demos of the people, it's a Greek root for that, they seem to not really be serving the people in all of this. Do you believe that if Mayor Frey and Governor Walz would at least attempt to cooperate with the White House, you might have a different outcome in Minneapolis instead of the repeat of what seemed to take place during COVID and the BLM movement?
Right. Well, I think it is very interesting. In 2024, a lot of the Democrat attorney generals across multiple states that were Democrat run came out stating, that firearms should not be allowed at political speech events. That includes speeches as well as protests in the situation. And so I think that's an interesting topic that they've turned on personally, and they've ramped up rhetoric on that, this man had a Second Amendment right, which he completely did in this sense. He had a concealed carry license according to reports. But I do think, the rhetoric from people like Tim Walz and Jacob Fry, it is a political theater in a lot of sense across the board, whether it be both parties. But I mean, this is a Democrat-run city. These are the same people in charge during the summer of love, and now here we are in the winter of love, and just years later with the same individuals in charge in that city. So yes, I do think they could have they're using the same tactics as they did just years ago, and coming to the table to negotiate, as well as you said earlier, places like Texas, where many of these ICE operations, CBP operations taking place, as well as DHS involvement in that state. Well, what are the differences there? Well, you have people and local law enforcement involvement and cooperating in those scenarios, and you don't see mass situations like this where protesters are closing down the streets. We currently have an individual there with the Daily Caller News Foundation, Jorge Ventura, doing video on the ground. And I mean, downtown Minneapolis right now looks like it's a situation out of Seattle just years ago where they had that autonomous zone. They're blocking the streets. They have armored vehicles coming in with ICE agents, and they're trying to block them and obstruct them. So that is what we're seeing right now. It's a war zone on the ground.
Yes, and to your point, I believe that this is a massive distraction ultimately to the fraud, waste, and abuse that's being discovered not only in Minnesota, but Maine, potentially Illinois, all the way out to California, as Governor Newsom really kind of made a spectacle of himself at the World Economic Forum. But sticking on this topic, Ashley, do you find this as a Second Amendment issue, and do you think that could boil over with conservatives and libertarians who see this as someone who had the right to be there with that weapon? We do know not only the Second Amendment as it stands, but apparently in Minnesota, you do not have to report to a police officer that you are armed in that moment. Do you find that boiling over somewhat on the right side of history as it would from left-wing agitators?
I absolutely do. I think there are some Republicans that have already come out, maybe not on the correct side on this issue compared to some other Republicans in a lot of ways when it comes to Second Amendment, upholding that in a lot of ways. Of course, this man was an American citizen. He had a concealed carry permit, according to reports. And there's also reports that there might have been an accidental discharge, of which sparked the death of this individual specifically. So I think there is a lot of things still circulating, videos still circulating, that we're going to have a clear and transparent investigation, and hopefully the American people are able to get that. I think transparency is lacking in a lot of areas within government, and that is why people do not trust it as much. So I think the issue here, as well as Tim Walz calling for local law enforcement involvement, but I don't understand. I think with Tim Walz calling for that, you saw just years ago he was trying to defund the police. I don't understand how people like him could be trusted by local law enforcement, as well as the waste, fraud, and abuse that was occurring in the state, like you said recently. How are they able to do a solid investigation in that sense? So I do feel like there's a distrust amongst everyone, whether it be the federal government, state government, in this sense, as to whether you're going to get the answer there. But I do think it is a Second Amendment issue, and it's going to be talked about a lot in the coming days.
I saw it on the ground in Chicago dating back to Laquan McDonald. It's a problem with local law enforcement has to think about specific reports, specific engagement or non-engagement might mean their livelihood. And that's why you saw such a downturn over the years in recruitment, but now seemingly an uptick, especially with federal officers with the Trump administration. So we appreciate you so much, Ashley Brassfield from the Daily Caller. Before we let you go, how are you holding up in Washington, D.C., a record snowstorm, I think since they've been keeping the records on the books?
Yes, well, I'm a Southern girl, so it's a new thing for me. But just outside, you might hear the beeping, and there's some snowplows getting the streets cleared out currently. But holding up quite well. Get a little bit of a remote day going on, so enjoying it a bit.
Very close to that Mason-Dixon line, and one of the reasons I moved down south to not deal with this, but you never know. Sometimes it does hit the south. We appreciate you so much, Ashley. Thank you for joining us on the Right Side of History.
Yes, thank you. Stay safe.
And as we dissect so much of the news happening on this rather fast-paced and ever-moving Monday, January 26th. If you're just tuning in, I'm Robert McNeely. Always wonderful to be with you here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. At the top of the hour, Karoline Leavitt holding a press briefing on, I'm sure it's going to be a main focus on Minneapolis, Minnesota as this continues to develop, as well as a snowstorm that is one of the largest that we might have remembered in recent history, if not the modern era. So we hope that you're staying safe, staying put, and acknowledging that many of you may be working remotely or being in school remotely or just having a simple old school snow day. And for many of you, somewhat of a brand new experience, especially in Tennessee and Mississippi that seem to really have that ice and snow hit harder than most parts of the country. In the meantime, we will take a quick commercial break for sponsorships here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, but stick with us as we are having a bright and sunny Monday after this storm. Hopefully no more precipitation in the meantime, but stick with us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live. Look, don't forget to watch my show right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's imperative that you do so, okay? Bye-bye.
allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. You can scan that QR code now, RSBN10. That is the code, easy to remember, for 10% off. This is ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, antibiotics that will save you and yours from bacterial and viral infections, NAD+, and much, much more. 200 essential medications and emergency medical kits, the meds you trust delivered to your door. Welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network as Karoline Leavitt, the superstar, the White House press secretary, coming live to you at the top of the hour in the James S. Brady briefing room in the West Wing of the White House. We will take you there live when it happens, scheduled roughly 45 minutes from now. In the meantime, thank you to our sponsors. You just saw that ad from the summertime. The allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits. So slightly different from what you're used to. allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits. It's a 20% off deal right now with RSBN20. And I have it right here, the nice handy kit. It looks kind of like a fanny pack. Guys, don't wear this around your waist. It's a 1980s, 1990s look. It might not look good on you, but this amazing company saving your life, literally, with Tamiflu, and also travel kits, emergency medical kits, including ivermectin, NAD+, methylene blue, that can make sure that you get out there, whether stocking up that medicine cabinet, which is so important in a storm like this, or if you're on the road traveling and you need this on hand. So this travel kit, again, a flu kit, the emergency kit, all in one here at allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits. Code RSBN20. Easy to be part of your carry-on, to carry in your bag there. Scan that QR code today, 20% off of emergency medication. Be sure to do that today. They're changing the ball game, especially when things are not accessible in a storm like this, like your local pharmacy, going online with the leading online family pharmacy. Again, it's allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits. Thank you to Kalshi.com/RSBN. We have it all lined up in a football season unlike any other, from college to the NFL, week after week, unpredictable. And it all culminates in February 8th, 2026 in San Francisco, California, when the Seattle Seahawks will meet the New England Patriots for Super Bowl 60. Scan that QR code there. Get your bets and your trades in now. And then when this ice melts, go grab those nachos and stock up for what's going to be a Buffalo Wings-sized football game. We can't wait for that. And how cool is it to see these guys out there not only praying together on the separate teams, but countless quarterbacks giving glory to God, from the Heisman Trophy winner, Mr. Fernando Mendoza, qualifying now and getting himself ready for the NFL draft, to Drake May. And what a story there. 23 years young. 10 years ago, he was in California for Super Bowl 50 to cheer on his hometown Carolina Panthers. And now a decade later, he's leading the New England Patriots back to glory and an attempt post the Tom Brady season, or Tom Brady era, to take them back to a Super Bowl championship. An exciting storyline there, as they're the first team in NFL history to lose 13-plus games the season prior, and then to come back with 9-0 on the road, including the playoffs. So a big thing to watch there. Kalshi.com/RSBN, all of those bets and trades. You saw some of the recents there, from the college football to Times Person of the Year. It's sports, it's music, it's politics, it's the American story. Might as well trade and bet on it, as Karoline Leavitt will hold that press conference at the top of the hour as we dissect what happened in Minneapolis back on Saturday and all of this winter storm, as well as other breaking topics. President Trump, off of a very successful trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland last week. Actually a huge week when you think about news dating back to the foreign policy that is ever evolving and has somewhat had a way of fooling nations, both friend and foe, and a smart tactic by the commander-in-chief, the deal-maker-in-chief, with cut number 3, Mr. Producer. It's these Democrats that have caused the chaos not only throughout our cities, but throughout our states, especially in these blue areas. President Trump stating on Truth Social during the 4 years of crooked Joe Biden and Democrat failed leadership, tens of millions of illegal alien criminals pouring into our country, including hundreds of thousands of convicted murderers, rapists, kidnappers, drug dealers, and terrorists. I won the election in a historic landslide, and Republicans won majorities in both the House and the Senate, in large part because we pledged to seal the border, which we have done, and launched the largest mass deportation of illegal criminals in American history. This deportation effort is underway, and in Republican-run cities and states, these operations are going peacefully and smoothly because local law enforcement officers are allowed to work with their federal counterparts. For example, in the 5 Republican-run states of Texas, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Louisiana, ICE arresting 150,245 criminal illegal aliens over the past year with zero protests and riots or chaos. Why? Because local law enforcement, police, and ICE are cooperating and working together. Meanwhile, Democrat-run sanctuary cities and states are refusing to cooperate with ICE, and they are actually encouraging left-wing agitators to unlawfully obstruct their operations to arrest the worst of the worst people. And by doing this, Democrats are putting illegal alien criminals over tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. That they have created dangerous circumstances for everyone across the country and who are involved. Tragically, 2 American citizens have lost their lives as a result of this Democrat-ensued chaos. And that is a very factual statement, as President Trump, with cut number 4, simply stating that Minnesota is a criminal cover-up of the massive financial fraud that has gone on. And we see this continuing with the rhetoric coming from Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey, and the Attorney General as well, Keith Ellison, someone who has very radical ties to organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood, to what's happening with the Somali illegal alien child care scandal as unearthed by Nick Shirley, again, a 23-year-old independent journalist with an iPhone. Amazing to think that no one else could have found that, and that politicians either blindly looked the other direction or perhaps were involved in that. We'll see where the investigation ultimately leads. Now, with all of that on the docket, Tom Homan is coming to Minnesota with cut number 16, Mr. Producer. President Trump stating just hours ago, I am sending Tom Homan to Minnesota. And that's tonight. He has not been involved in that area, but knows and likes many of the people there. Tom is tough but fair and will report directly to me. Separately, a major investigation is going on with respect to the massive $20 billion plus welfare fraud that has taken place in Minnesota, and at least partially responsible for the violent organized protests going on in the streets. Additionally, the DOJ and Congress are looking at Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who left Somalia with nothing and now reportedly worth more than $44 million. Amazing how these politicians make all this money while they're serving in Congress. Time will tell all. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJT. So we'll watch as that continues to evolve with cut number 18 as well, Mr. Producer. Dems inciting violence. We continue to see this on the streets of America. Again, almost a repeat of what took place back during the BLM and COVID insurrection of 2020, but President Trump posting this on Truth Social.
Get the f*** out of Minneapolis. Sure, that's part of my role as mayor. And by the way, protests here
in Minneapolis, we will not cooperate with ICE or any federal agency.
What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust.
These Border Patrol officers Of course, I bear responsibility to bring down the temperature.
To ICE, get the f*** out of Minneapolis.
Sure, that's part of my role as mayor. And by the way, protests here in Minneapolis are peaceful.
The desire to get out and protest and to speak up to this administration of how wrong this is, that is a patriotic duty. That is a patriotic duty.
We have had perhaps tens of thousands of people peacefully protesting. Yeah, they are going to stand up for their neighbors.
The human desire to lash out in this moment is very real. And from here on, I have a very simple message. We do not need any further help from the federal government.
Thank you to allfamilypharmacy.com. This is /emergency-kits, so slightly different than the other code, because now you have 20% off, a very generous gift from Michael Kunzler and the great people over at All Family Pharmacy. So scan that QR code now, and you will receive within a matter of days, especially during this snowstorm, one of these guys, an emergency medical kit that can handle the flu. Or if you're traveling on the road with an emergency medical kit, sinus infection kit, the essentials, and much, much more. Code RSBN20, it's RSBN20, allfamilypharmacy.com /emergency-kits, 20% off with code RSBN20. We are grateful for this organization. If you've been watching since the top of the broadcast from 11 a.m. Eastern, we replayed that wonderful interview with my colleague Matthew Alvarez, talking to the co-owner Michael Kunzler in depth about these essentials, because when you have storms that have happened with 1 million people losing power over the course of the last several hours, from Texas all the way to Maine and about everywhere in between, 40 states affected out of the 50 in our great state of the Union by this snow and ice storm. And not just water and essential medication and food that you need, but sometimes you can't get to that pharmacy. Sometimes you can't get to the grocery store, and sometimes they simply do not prescribe it. At allfamilypharmacy.com /emergency-kits, they're changing the ball game when it comes to convenience, safety, and making sure you're prepared. Code RSBN20 is the go-to there. Scan that QR code there now. And a great gift for Valentine's Day coming up. Can you believe we're almost, 2.5 weeks from that? Angel Paste, the miracle cream, great for guys and gals out there, especially those busy working professionals. With the vitamin B miracle cream that is good year-round to keep your skin glowing. I use it on a daily basis. It's non-GMO, no chemicals. Also the orange option, exquisite for this time of year to get that extra vitamin C boost and to help with collagen. It's angelpaste.com. They also have a natural facial spray to paint the town red. So when we thaw from this ice storm, you can go out there and enjoy a night on the town. Paint the town red with angelpaste.com. They're Christian-owned. They hire veterans. They're based out of Spring, Texas, off the Gulf of America. And dear friends of ours here at the network, thank you, angelpaste.com. Experience the miracle that is supporting the right side of history. I had the absolute privilege of speaking with Jim Paff recently. This was actually recorded last week and before the Davos, Switzerland meeting for the World Economic Forum, but some good perspective on Congress and what's going to take place in now the second term of the 119th Congress as we lead up to these 2026 midterms. And Jim Paff, the president of the Conservative Caucus, always has great analysis as he has been a man in the arena, marred with the blood, sweat, and tears of what can be the very first article of our constitutional republic, the Congress. A nightmare in and of itself these days, but regardless, always wonderful to receive his expertise and analysis of the lawmakers that are supposed to be working for you. Welcome back to RSBN for, I believe, the first time in the new year. It's Mr. Jim Paff from the Conservative Caucus. Greenland is a big topic of discussion. Do you think President Trump will be successful in obtaining this? And if so, how does he go about this? Because this could be a big move for the United States.
Well, art of the deal, I think he really would like to see us be controlling Greenland. I think there's a strong argument for that. One way or the other, the presence is going to be much stronger. Our ability to utilize that area for our protection and for making sure that Arctic waters are not controlled in any way by China and Russia. Of course, Russia has a large part of their border on the Arctic, so that's always an issue. China's just kind of, has an expeditionary force, so to speak, there. But yeah, I think that something really big is going to happen. I'm really surprised. I was reading what was it? I know what it was. That you've got NATO forces or NATO countries sending troops up to Greenland right now to protect it from us. We're in very interesting times because this also does represent and exposes some very interesting dynamics that are changing between the United States and Europe. As Europe is going down a long censorship battle against its citizens and reductions in freedoms, while, still not upholding their requirement to kind of keep the freedom of the West a strong and thriving thing. So those two things are kind of meeting one another. And I do think that Donald Trump's effort towards Greenland, sincere as it is also in the mix to try to keep Europe understanding that they're falling down a bad path and they need to work with us more. So from that regard, this art of the deal approach that Donald Trump always has, I think is being effective. I think it's an effective one.
It'll be very fascinating to watch in the coming days and to see if, yes, NATO can be that stronghold as it once was. But we know that President Trump, to his point, whether or not you agree with this Don Roe doctrine, in a sense, he has been very clear about making everyone pay their fair share. So I think at least people maybe on the other side can concede the fact that, yes, it's an even playing field now. How about Gaza? Because this is going to be something that is perhaps more difficult in the sense of Palestinian peoples and a governance there really led by Hamas, influenced by Hezbollah. Of course, a much more weakened Iranian front with the mullahs and the Republican Guard. But you look how they have exported terrorism throughout the region. Can that board of peace really make Gaza into one of the best places perhaps to live in the Middle East?
I think the potential's still there. Listen, Iran is just a little bit distracted right now, and they're not putting their fingers deeply into this situation. I mean, I'm sure their tentacles are out there to some degree, but they're just trying to keep things going at home. So that actually provides a very real opportunity for good peace to come in that region, but it's still going to be very, very difficult to deal with Gaza. If they could ever get it right, Donald Trump's absolutely correct. It would be an economic renaissance for the Gaza Strip. Remember, not too long ago, back in the 70s and 80s until about the 1990s when things started to really fall apart, Lebanon was one of the wealthiest countries in the region. You had a very positive tourism economy there. You had it was really growing and thriving. You had some business development that was happening. That all fell apart when Beirut fell to Hezbollah terrorists. Same thing in Gaza, though. I mean, I just think when you're on the Mediterranean there with beautiful Mediterranean waters, the opportunity for ships to come into your area and provide some, connection to resorts and the already thriving cruise business that's in the area, and the fact that you could really have a coordination with Israel, which is a thriving tech economy. And it could really be an opportunity for Gazans if they were willing to do it. That's some years away, I think. I don't think we're close to it, but that is the hope and the opportunity. With Iran on its heels at the moment, that possibility becomes greater. If the Iranian government somehow survives all this, which I don't predict that they will. I think this may be the final end. About a 70% chance of that. If they were to then it probably would all fall down the tubes.
And what would happen to Iran, Jim? Will we have something like the 1970s where it almost mirrored images like America, like that of Venezuela prior to 1992, because we have a geopolitical narrative shaping out right now that is seemingly once in a generation? And do you think the Iranian people would choose a government similar to that of Israel, or more technocratic and potentially more on the side of religious extremism like we see in present day Iran?
Well, there's always a threat for religious extremism to continue. But keep in mind that the majority of Iranian citizens are more Persian than they are Muslim. I mean, there is obviously a strong Muslim contingent there, but it's not a majority. That's the first thing. So that Persian heritage also is something that Iranians draw upon of any religious persuasion. You have a Christian contingent there. You've got a Persian, maybe Christian, non-Christian contingent there that really see Iran's history through its Persian origins as the main driver for what they do. I mean, they go all the way. I know of Iranians that I've talked to who love Israel on the basis of what the ancient King Cyrus did to help Israel rebuild the temple. I mean, that is still a discussion point for many people in Iran. At least they know that history. But here's something that's also very interesting. There is a very well-drafted constitution from the 1920s that envisioned an Iranian parliament and an Iranian system that was very much a Republican form of government. I've read this many times in the past and find it's not a perfect document, none is, but it's a pretty darn sufficient one for forming a government. And there are a large contingent of people that would like to implement that in this system. The problem is you're about a generation and a half away from what helped Iran be a thriving economy, a thriving culture, an open culture, very westernized, you're right to say. You've got a generation and a half removed from that, and that's always hard to build back up. But there still is a touch point there, and that's a possibility. That would be the hope. But, as with any situation like this, you're going to have different factions from different perspectives that it's going to be very, very difficult to bring all that together. And you're going to have these arrogant outside influences that frankly have their tentacles all over the world right now through the World Economic Forum and through radical extremism that's out there. It's going to be a really big challenge, but I think you got a large enough population that there's a better than half chance that could become successful.
Well, in the Persian culture, it's an extraordinary civilization. And like you said, Jim, lots of history there to look towards. I wonder if it will be closer to that of, because we look at Venezuela, you have the refugees in South Florida, roughly 8 million of those Venezuelan Americans living in the free Sunshine State. You have groups in Chile, you have them in Spain, as well as around the world. So you have a majority faction that is wanting that liberation, perhaps can remember that liberation. I wonder if the president and his team will use somewhat of a strategy like in the first term with North Korea, almost playing these propaganda videos. And I don't mean to give it any sense of like I'm laughing at it, but rather propaganda in the sense of this is what you can have, because President Trump showed the North Koreans and their leadership what South Korea had: the lights on, capitalism, options, prosperity, not skyrocketing inflation. And I wonder if that can actually help with the Iranian people, as they seem to want a different government, considering what's happening there for their homeland.
Yeah, well, I think that there is a pretty decent chance. Listen, there are a large contingent of people in that country. Remember, there are a lot of cities on the Persian Peninsula. It's not just Tehran. There are some decent sized cities throughout. Not all of them have been controlled and necessarily indoctrinated to the extent that would make that impossible. But there clearly has been indoctrination, clearly has been a police force effort to shut down opposition, including murders. People are going to want to be free from that. And actually, I think there's greater hope of that in Iran than there was in the former Soviet Union, which still has a bit of an authoritarian contingent and had a 70-plus year history under the Soviet Union, really 2 to 2.5 generations away from any memory of what was good beforehand. So Iran has this hope, I think, and they do have a culture to draw upon, and a not too far distant in the past free culture, or at least even if it wasn't a strong parliamentary system in all of its iterations in the past, it was a free system. There is a great heritage to draw upon. So that's very hopeful. And by the way, you talk about, just take a look at Venezuela, which has a shorter time period away. It could quickly reform on its side. That could be an inspiration. If Donald Trump's able to get a new administration in Venezuela, that's just going to be an inspiration as well for Iranians that we want to duplicate that. That has a human factor to it that's hard to quantify, but I think really exists. So I do have hope for Iran if the regime can fall. And that has not happened yet. So we don't know where that's going at present.
Yes, we'll watch that very closely, as 2026 could be very historic on the global scale. Now back to domestic policy, the great healthcare bill, really seemingly President Trump's star achievement when it comes to domestic policy and diving into these midterms. Is it something that the administration can get through Congress? Because it seems as if the can just gets kicked down the road when it comes to healthcare and the cost and the questions that ultimately led to Obamacare. And I think what many perceive as the Unaffordable Care Act, but this looks to solve those problems rather quickly.
Well, I have meetings on Capitol Hill with my partner in this as we are trying to get a healthcare push through the Conservative Caucus and talk about this. I talked with a lot of members of Congress. The proposals that we've been talking about, they were asking for model legislation. I think that there is a real desire to do something. So whether they can or not, really the only means to do that right now is through reconciliation. And there is a lot that could be done. Remember, Obamacare, much of Obamacare was passed through reconciliation. The initial bill passed because Democrats at the time in 2009 had a near complete majority, veto-proof majority. Actually, they did have a veto-proof majority for a time in the Senate. They were able to get past cloture. So they passed it initially. Then they came back after the losses in 2010 and pushed it through reconciliation. And so we can take the same process if we were wanted to. Senator Rick Scott has been out today, this week, making a strong push for some of his ideas. We're actually going to make some communication with them too with some of our ideas, which involve transparency and various things like that. I would like to encourage people to go to goldenageblueprint.net, I believe. And you're going to see a book called The Golden Age of U.S. Healthcare. We're promoting this because we think it's a really good opportunity for us to radically change things for the better. goldenageblueprint.net. And, we're close. I think that there's desire to do something. We lost the leverage point when they extended the Obamacare, or with the bill passing out of the House to extend Obamacare subsidies. And the Senate's likely to take that up too, and you've got a lot of Republican senators that are willing to extend that, and it's very sad. That was a great leverage point, but I think reconciliation is an opportunity if they're willing to do it. And by the way, the Senate can tell the parliamentarian, we make the rules, not you. Like, don't tell us we can't do whatever you say we want to do in reconciliation. We need to do it. We also need to look at Senator Mike Lee's reminder for senators that the whole cloture requirement and the filibuster rule is a standing filibuster thing. You make them stay up late and get too tired and then move to a majority vote situation. That's an opportunity as well, too. He's been talking a lot about it. We've been promoting it. But yeah, I think there is an opportunity. Senator Rick Scott seems to have a good initial idea on how to do that. And we'll see what happens from here. 50-50 chance. I'm not going to say it's likely, but there is a possibility.
Well, thank you for that reminder, Jim, because it brings to mind this complaining about the parliamentarian being in the way and seemingly the rules get in the way. But these United States senators, I'll give them credit, right, left, and center, they end up there because they're relatively smart people. I'll give them that on the average in the whole. But do you just find it that they like to throw these things out there to confuse people instead of actually getting where the goose is with the gander, or however that saying goes? It seems as if these United States senators don't always take responsibility for their actions.
Listen, we've got a real problem in both Republican caucuses, in the House and the Senate. There is a large enough contingent of people who are wimpy about their approach, who, frankly, many of them, it's not a majority. I think most senators and members of Congress want to support Donald Trump, but there's a large enough contingent of them that are, frankly, just trying to sit it out until they can go back to normal at the end of 2028, or even after 2026. If Democrats, for example, were to take the House, they'll be on board with Democrats on things. There is a good 1/3 in each House of Republicans that at any given time can go the wrong way. It's frustrating for people that follow our organization, because they want the MAGA agenda to be successful. Healthcare is a big part of that. It's a big part of it. It's not the biggest thing on the minds of Americans right now when you look at the polls, but when they do talk about it, they have grave concern. And if Republicans were willing to do something on this that was significant, that took power away from Washington, D.C., that reversed the failures of Obamacare and allowed Americans to make their own more of their own health decisions, the American people will positively respond to that. I look, and I was talking to members of Congress about this last week, I look at the millennial generation. Many of these people, they've got teenagers to preteens that are still on their health care. A whole lot of them have joined on health savings account plans, which is where you put your money into a savings account and tax deductible, or without paying taxes on it. You use it without paying taxes. They've been socking money into these HSAs, and now they would like to have a chance to shop at lower prices to utilize that money in an effective way. We could also, and so the millennial generation, which is a big voting bloc that's important for Republicans, if you would just give these families an opportunity to make a little better life for themselves, particularly in this area that's so expensive, then I think you would really, Republicans would be making a strong argument in 2020 in November of 2026, just a few months hence. So this is a big issue. Republicans need to get on it. We just have a big problem with a few Republicans, the Lisa Murkowski types, the Mitch McConnell types, that frankly don't even care what American citizens think. They only care what they want, and they love Washington, D.C. and what it does.
And on that topic, we have roughly 47, perhaps more, retirements to be announced in the House, whether they're running for the Senate, governorships, or even just temporarily leaving politics at that. A handful in the Senate, including Mitch McConnell. What are your thoughts, Jim, if you're not only running a campaign, but being on the policy side of all of these important initiatives? What is the average campaign as a Republican for Congress look like diving into 2026?
Well, it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of new effort that we haven't seen. Of course, right with that number, a lot of new people. In 2010, we had 63 brand new members of Congress come in, not just from seats gained, of which there were many, dozens, but also of turnovers. And it was a real opportunity to reframe what happens. And that was in the House, by the way. Sorry, there were also new senators, including Marco Rubio and some others. But that was a real opportunity to reframe the debate and start new, get Washington back on track. The problem at the time was you had John Boehner as Speaker of the House and Mitch McConnell as Senate Majority Leader. They didn't want that. They undermined everything that happened with the Tea Party. With Donald Trump in office, if we can get enough MAGA thinking Republicans elected in all these brand new seats, nominated and elected, there's a real opportunity to get Donald Trump's agenda moving forward. That's the hope that is out there. If Americans who supported Donald Trump are willing to fight for it, I think they are, and we certainly want to help them do that through our organization. This is the best opportunity we've had to radically transform what's been going on for decades in Washington, D.C., if we're willing to do it. This century has been a watershed moment in American history. We have come closer to our entire American republic going away. And we've got a group of Democrats out there, whether it's in Minnesota or some of these other states, whether it's the LA riots last year, they are willing to entirely overthrow the American system, if they can, to create something radically different. They do it through election laws that are obscene. We just saw Virginia, by the way, today, pass a law that says you can't look at the paper ballots if you're going to do a recount. They just passed this law. You have to go by what the machines say. Now, what's the reason for that? It's obvious what the reason is. It's to make elections go the certain way you want to and not let anybody else inspect that. That's what Democrats stand for. They've done it through their policy. They're doing it through this group of people that Don Lemon went into a church in Minnesota over the weekend, and literally they shut down a service, an operating Christian worship service, to intimidate these people on the immigration issue. I mean, these people are for shutting down everything that matters in the United States and reforming it and refashioning it in the same manner that the Iranian mullahs do it, that Nicolas Maduro did it, that happened in Cuba in 1959. This is their strategy and their idea or this is their end game and their idea for what America should be. And we have to push back on it. With this number of new seats, there's a real opportunity to change that paradigm with the help of the Trump administration, if we're willing to do it as a citizenry.
And we're here to cover it and to get your expert analysis. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. A very happy new year to you. It's Jim Paff from the Conservative Caucus, a great group working very hard to make America great again. We'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Robert. Great to be with you. And the first time this year.
It's almost hard to believe that we are 26 days into the new year, and the start of the new year gets a lot of people thinking about their health, especially with this ice and snowstorm that has taken place, and what you might have stocked up at home and what you might not have stocked up at home. That's why allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits. So important to take advantage. It's 20% off, just announced late last week by Michael Kunzler, the great co-owner of this organization. With code RSBN20, scan that QR code now. All Family Pharmacy, built around patients and their needs, especially when it comes to things like having a flu kit, a travel kit, emergency medical kit, and really all the above. A sinus infection kit, so important to have this time of year. In fact, I have one right here for you, and you can see how easy it is, light, and usable. You can carry this on the plane with you if you need, or by automobile or train even, although a lot of things have changed over the last few hours with 17,000 flights canceled over the course of the last 2 days, 4,000 today alone. But regardless of that, we hope that you have these life-saving essentials at home. And if you don't, go to allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits with code RSBN10, 20% off right now. It helps families get essential medications at All Family Pharmacy. In doing so, including the ones that are difficult to obtain through traditional pharmacies and those places that might not prescribe them. That's exactly why so many people turn to them when sickness is going around, especially this time of year. That's why Tamiflu so crucial with this flu season really skyrocketing. Get ready ahead of time. And when you're tired of insurance complications, this is also the place to go. You don't need insurance. No red tape, no bureaucracy, no hassle. Just a licensed U.S. doctor on the other end to send over those medications within days. When you're done with all of the research and tired of the hassle that you can receive from traditional pharmacies, this online convenience, and especially during a time like these storms, allfamilypharmacy.com/emergency-kits, the place to go. Again, 20% off with code RSBN20. And we have that kit right here that is so essential and so easy. I mean, it's as light as a feather. Might as well take advantage of that today. Thank you also to Kalshi.com/RSBN. You've seen some of our old questions there. College football. You know, Indiana Hoosiers successful in that. The Heisman Trophy winner, Mr. Mendoza, eligible now for the National Football League. Should have an exciting career. We'll watch that closely. As Times Person of the Year was also a big question on Kalshi.com/RSBN before 2026. And now, San Francisco, California, the site of Super Bowl 60, the New England Patriots, led by Drake May, going up against the Seattle Seahawks, the home of the 12th man. Should be a star-studded showdown, as a decade ago, a young 13-year-old boy, Drake May, enjoyed his favorite team, the Carolina Panthers, in Super Bowl 50. And 10 years later, will be on that same field to fight to reclaim the Patriot dynasty of yesteryear. Kalshi.com/RSBN. What say you on sports, music, politics, and much, much more? Might as well trade and bet on America 250. It's all there for you at Kalshi.com/RSBN. 5 minutes from now, Karoline Leavitt, the superstar, the press secretary, to be hosting that White House press briefing, an ever important one, as countless are in the present day, as the sun is peeking through on the icy, snowy federal city. Just over the course of since being on the air, President Trump sharing with number 19, Mr. Producer, that Gaza and that deal holding up. So some optimism there as President Trump just recovered the last hostage body in Gaza, thus got back all 20 of the living hostages and all of the dead. Amazing job. Most thought of it as an impossible thing to do. Congratulations to my great team of champions, President DJT. He was also on the phone with Governor Walz from Minnesota with cut number 20, President Trump stating, Governor Tim Walz called me with the request to work together with respect to Minnesota. It was a very good call, and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength. I asked Governor Walz that I would have Tom Homan call him, and that we are looking for are any and all criminals that they have in their possession. The governor very respectfully understood that, and I will be speaking to him in the near future. He was happy that Tom Homan was going to Minnesota, and so am I. We have had so much tremendous success in Washington, D.C., Memphis, Tennessee, and New Orleans, Louisiana, and virtually everywhere or every other place that we have touched. And even in Minnesota, crime is way down. But both Governor Walz and I want to make it better. Signed, President Donald John Trump. So important to note that there, as there has been controversy, but the president trying to find the best foot forward to solve these problems going on across the country. And in addition to that, we have cut number 11, Mr. Producer, where President Trump talking about the gun that was seized from the scene specifically. For context, that this is the gunman's gun loaded with 2 additional full magazines and ready to go. What is that all about? Where are the local police? Why aren't they allowed to protect ICE officers? The mayor and the governor called them off. It is stated that many of these police were not allowed to do their job and that ICE had to protect themselves. Not an easy thing to do. Where does Ilhan Omar have $34 million in her account? And where are the tens of billions of dollars that have been stolen from the once great state of Minnesota? We are there because of massive monetary fraud with billions of dollars missing and illegal criminals that were allowed to infiltrate the state through the Democrats' open border policy. We want the money back, and we want it back now. And those fraudsters who stole the money are going to jail where they belong. This is no different than a really big bank robbery, much of which you are witnessing is a cover-up for this theft and fraud. The mayor and the governor are inciting insurrection with their pompous, dangerous, and arrogant rhetoric. Instead, these sanctimonious political fools should be looking for the billions of dollars that have been stolen from the people of Minnesota and the United States of America. Let our ICE patriots do their job. 12,000 illegal alien criminals, many of them violent, have been arrested and taken out of Minnesota. If they were still there, you would see something far worse than you are witnessing today. So as we've seen, even dating back last week with those strong negotiations, this is what the deal maker in chief does. He goes at the heart of the issue and then works to bring consensus and is unafraid to speak truth to power. It's something that would be nice to see more on the Republican side. As we heard from Jim Paff, there's roughly a third of congressional Republicans who are very happy to team up with Democrats, but it's one thing we admire about the left. They remain united and are willing to shut down this government and impeach the President of the United States yet again for nothing, for a potentially historic third time, as Governor Newsom and Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, they want him to be Speaker, and they want him to move forward with that, and something that's likely to happen if you're not involved in these 2026 midterms. Now, going to an international type, well, first we'll take a sponsor here, Venice.ai/RSBN. App Store, Google Play, 20% off now with code RSBN. It's Venice.ai/RSBN. 20% off with that code, RSBN. Now, many people fearing artificial intelligence, but as the vice president has said, we must win the AI race. In addition to that, do not be afraid. Let not your heart be troubled, as we are reminded that once a day, 365 times in the Bible, And this AI product committed to protecting you on your phone, whether it's phone calls, text messages, also email, especially Venice.ai/RSBN. Doing that there in the App Store and Google Play. 20% off now with code RSBN. Also, thank you to the miracle that is angelpaste.com, the vitamin B infused, non-GMO, no chemicals in the facial cream that I use every day. Actually, a cream that's good for all of your skin. And their orange option, great this time of year as well. Vitamin C infused, non-GMO, non-chemical as well to boost that collagen. There's also a facial spray that I'm quite fond of. It's for guys and gals. Hey, Valentine's Day around the corner. A great gift for your significant other. Experience the miracle of angelpaste.com. Christian-owned. They hire veterans, and they're based in Spring, Texas, right off the Gulf of America. It is a fantastic group. Go check out their products today, angelpaste.com. We know that China is now eating Canada alive because of Prime Minister Mark Carney revealing that at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, just a day before President Trump's keynote to the global meeting that has been taking place since the 1970s. And with cut number 5, Mr. Producer, we have that situation. President Trump talking about China is successfully and completely taking over the once great country of Canada. So sad to see it happen. I only hope they leave ice hockey alone. President DJT, of course, some jest in that, but we've seen it. I saw it myself traveling on a bike trip back in 2019 through Alberta. Just extraordinary. Going into Calgary, then traveling up to Banff and starting that trip there all the way to Jasper, Alberta, Canada. Gorgeous to see the elk along that trail, but many of the restaurants and the businesses were in Chinese lettering. And with Chinese nationals there, they have focused on global domination, and we've seen it in every country, and now their focus being that of Canada. With cut number 6, Mr. Producer, the opposition party, and I should say opposition parties, exploring that in Ontario and stating that manufacturing, we need to work with the United States because we cannot circumvent all of this into Chinese Communist Party hands. So some warning from our friends just north of our border.
Hello, good morning. My name is Brian Kingston. I'm the president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Canada's auto industry is under enormous pressure, with over 90% of Canadian production destined for the United States. There is no industry without U.S. access and North American integration. Diversification is not an option for automotive, as markets in Europe and Asia are better served by assembly plants in those regions. Canada's market alone is too small to justify large-scale manufacturing. The future of Canada's auto industry and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that it supports depends on securing our trade relationship with the United States. The federal government's decision to open the Canadian market to Chinese EVs is deeply concerning. The Canada-China strategic partnership has the potential to undermine Canada's auto sector and presents risk to the future of our integrated North American automotive supply chain. As the Premier has outlined, it is critical that the federal government rectifies this situation by taking immediate action to bolster the competitiveness of the very companies that have been building cars and employing Canadians for over 100 years. Step 1 is repealing the costly and redundant EV sales mandate. Under the new Canada-China strategic partnership, Chinese manufacturers that do not build cars in Canada or employ Canadians will receive up to $980 million per year in compliance credits. These compliance credits will be paid for by the very companies that operate here, taking money that could be reinvested in Canada, in Ontario, and sending it to China. Step 2 is taking action to make Canada more competitive for auto. We must urgently lower the cost of investing in plants, machinery, and R&D to give Canada an edge over other jurisdictions. The future of Canada's auto industry hangs in the balance. The actions that we take now will determine whether or not we have an industry for 100 more years. Thank you.
Matter of Canadian integration, especially in automotive manufacturing, stating that the last thing Canada needs and the world needs is to have China take over our friends to the north. It's not going to happen or even come close to happening. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So all of those very big updates we have outlined over the course of roughly 2 hours here on a snow-ridden United States of America. It is a winter wonderland. Feels like the fable Frozen, I think, in many different municipalities and zip codes throughout this great country of ours. But we hope you're staying safe and have plenty of food, water, and not suffering too much from the outages. We know that 1 million Americans have suffered in one way, shape, or form some outages. So always good to be prepared with those flashlights and battery powers and generators as well, as sometimes these things do happen, as outlined by the lovely and classy Christina Loren, our chief meteorologist. The fact that just a quarter inch of that ice can lead to a compression or compound of nearly 500 pounds onto those wires, especially those telephone poles outside, and can really mess up the grid and the system. So be prepared in these moments, no question about that. Moments away from now, Karoline Leavitt holding a press briefing. That's why we're here today, and the superstar press secretary to touch on some very important matters at the White House and in the James S. Brady briefing room in the West Wing. In the meantime, we will take a quick commercial break for sponsors here on the right side of history. Do not change that dial. It is Monday, January 26th, and you're watching Right Side Broadcasting Network.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live. Look, don't forget to watch my show right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's imperative that you do so, okay? Bye-bye.
allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. You can scan that QR code now, RSBN10. That is the code, easy to remember, for 10% off. This is ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, antibiotics that will save you and yours from bacterial and viral infections, NAD+, and much, much more. 200 essential medications and emergency medical kits, the meds you trust delivered to your door. Welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network. I'm Robert McNeely at roughly 10 after the hour. A very good afternoon to all y'all on the East and Central time zones here in the United States, the ones who got hit hard with that snow and ice, and then all the way across the mountain and West Coast as, wow, we saw a barn burner in the NFL yesterday for Championship Sunday, the Patriots over the Denver Broncos, and how that game changed with so much snow rapidly hitting there. Jim Nantz and Tony Romo on the call there for CBS, and both of them saying we could not recall when either as players or even commentating the snow and the weather had changed so quickly in an AFC Championship game. That was exciting. 10-7 the New England Patriots led by Drake May and Sam Darnold. His team really taking it to Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua and also Devontae Adams. Some amazing plays yesterday. If you have a chance, go back and scroll through some of that if you have some downtime in your snow day, if you have the day off today, because two outstanding games, the NFC Championship there in Seattle, Washington. The 12th man, the home team successful, 31-27, advancing to San Francisco, California, February 8th. 2026, the Sunday Super Bowl 60. We look forward to that, as every once in a while we turn into RSBN Sports, and we're big sports fans here. But the ongoing Super Bowl and the gladiator theme of the time, it's American politics. There's no question about that, and always plenty to talk about with cut number 6 cut number 7, Mr. Producer, that Comer interview. Very key to what's taking place, because Jack Smith was on the docket just last week. Highly respected Congressman James Comer was great in his interview this morning with Maria Bartiromo, and he said it all concerning Minnesota, deranged Jack Smith, and many other topics of interest on her Sunday show, and he is doing a fantastic job. President Trump stating that right there on Truth Social for you from Maria Bartiromo's Sunday show. And what might have gotten mixed up in all of the news from this weekend with cut number 8, the emergency response from FEMA, working under the oversight from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. I have just approved emergency declarations for Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Maryland, Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Indiana, and West Virginia. We're working closely with FEMA, governors, and state emergency management teams to ensure the safety of everybody. Stay safe and stay warm. And especially stay warm in Minnesota. Thank you to mypillow.com/RSBN, the mattress and topper sale. Mr. Mike Lindell, the CEO and now Republican gubernatorial candidate up there in the great state of Minnesota. Always a great deal or two. What a deal maker. Someone I think who might have to have a show with President Trump when it's all said and done. Going as low as $99.99 right now, plus free shipping on your entire order. MyPillow.com. It's 800-836-7566. Support Mike Lindell and Right Side Broadcasting Network. You can shop now at mypillow.com/RSBN and save with code RSBN. Easy to remember there. A few of my favorites happen to be the My Slippers, the My Coffee. It's even if you're not a coffee drinker, you're going to love the smell of those free and fair trade coffee beans. Also, the Giza Dream Sheets, really very comfortable. Again, all made here in the USA, and that specifically coming from the Mediterranean. So some of the most comfortable cotton in all the world. MyPillow.com/RSBN. 2,000 plus products. The mattress and topper sale going on now for as low as $99.99. Thank you to Mike Lindell and MyPillow. Code RSBN gives you the big savings. Thank you to you, the viewer, truly for tuning in. I know you have a lot of options out there, especially in this new media era, especially with streaming. And thank you for coming to us, your go-to Rally Network and your live desk. Support us right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, rsbnetwork.com/donate, or text RSBN to 801-801. In addition to that, if you like to sign those checks and write those money orders, we do have that address there, 1550. That's 1550 Opelika Road, Suite 6, Box 344. It's the loveliest village on the plains, Auburn, Alabama, 36830. A big celebration this weekend as Auburn's men's basketball team taking down number 16, Florida, over the course of that. So we're all smiles down here in the loveliest village. But again, we'd be even happier if you can support us financially, as we're not a big corporate entity. We are just getting out the news to you and your go-to live desk and rally network for all things 4547, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, the 50th Vice President, J.D. Vance, and the 119th Congress, the First and Second Lady, and everything happening inside and outside of the Beltway, and especially the stories that affect you in your neck of the woods. In fact, if you wish to opine, write to us, feedback@rsbn.tv, feedback@rsbn.tv. Thank you for your support. In addition to the donations, you can go to rsbnetwork.com/newsletter. There you can like, share, and subscribe across all platforms to get the word out there. We've been around for about a decade now, but we've evolved, and we will continue to do that over the course of this second term, but also with the ever-changing new media landscape. An exciting time to be in the /newsletter for all America First updates and exclusive offers right here on the right side of history. as we await Karoline Leavitt to hold a press briefing, one that will be, I'm just going to predict some fireworks in the process, because sadly you have some colleagues, and there's a lot of good people right, left and center in this media business. The problem is many have those clickbait questions or those gotcha questions, and some of the biggest offenders of that woke ideology that Bill Maher talks about. This is really the delusion of the woke left and the radical nature of those who think that they can place themselves, whether it be in historical time periods or even today in the present day and what happened on Saturday, and think they can do someone else's role or job better by just throwing out slogans, by just involving themselves in tribalism, and ultimately not using common sense. As I spoke at the top of this, coming out here, with as serious as all of these issues are and have been, and some people disagree with me, and that's okay. If you want to opine, feedback at rsbn.tv. We appreciate your thoughts on all the big issues of the day and what might be controversial and might not be controversial. But as I've seen it, as I've cited Supreme Court rulings, many that have been unanimous, I don't see this specifically as a Second Amendment issue like some do. Of course, the individual had the right to carry. Of course, the Second Amendment protects that. But common sense would tell you not to approach and even impede potentially a law enforcement investigation as they are trying to uphold Title VIII. And Title VIII, in fact, to secure those borders against criminal gangs and things like Trende Aragua, and these horrible criminals that were emptied out of prisons from Central and South America that have come through our south border because of the prior administration and their lack of clarity. And I think for those who have lost minors and children to fentanyl, the 300,000 that were trafficked that we know of, and several thousand now being recovered by the Trump administration and identified, some of their lives will never be the same for the repeated rapes and the violence that they've experienced due to these evil organizations. So the outcry for that should be louder, because the fact that ICE is on the ground, you wonder why they're on the ground. It's that reason. It's because of people like Joe Biden. It's because of people like Alejandro Mayorkas. And if you slow down the video of what took place in that moment, you have these dog whistles being blown. You have the confusion of the cold. You have the shouting and the clear not listening to lawful commands from police officers. And this is why we need Civics 101, again, back in the country. Because when you are being apprehended, it is right to surrender. Let's go to Karoline Leavitt right now at the White House.
President Trump continues to monitor the situation closely, and he has remained in constant contact with FEMA and emergency responders. President Trump also quickly approved 12 federal emergency disaster declarations within 24 hours for the states of Arkansas, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia, enabling these states to access critical federal resources to supplement their response efforts if needed. These declarations will help state-led efforts of turning power back on, clearing roads for emergency services, and keeping communities safe. The White House will continue to correspond directly with governors and local officials in the coming days, especially in those states that were harshly impacted by this storm. I would also like to address the chaotic scenes in Minnesota over the weekend. Nobody in the White House, including President Trump, wants to see people getting hurt or killed in America's streets. This includes Renee Good, Alex Preddy, the brave men and women of federal law enforcement, and the many Americans who have been victimized at the hands of illegal alien criminals. Saturday's shooting remains under active investigation by Homeland Security Investigations and the FBI. The Customs and Border Protection is also conducting their own internal review. As President Trump said yesterday, The administration is reviewing everything with respect to the shooting, and we will let that investigation play out. But let's be clear about the circumstances which led to that moment on Saturday. This tragedy occurred as a result of a deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota. For weeks, Governor Walz and the Mayor Jacob Fry and other elected Democrats were spreading lies about federal law enforcement officers who are risking their lives daily to remove the worst criminal illegal aliens from our streets: murderers, rapists, pedophiles, human traffickers, and gang members. Governor Walz and Mayor Fry have shamefully blocked local and state police from cooperating with ICE, actively inhibiting efforts to arrest violent criminals. They have also used their platforms to encourage left-wing agitators to stalk, record, confront, and obstruct federal officers who are just trying to lawfully perform their duties, which has created dangerous situations threatening both these officers and the general public and Minnesotans alike. This is precisely what unfolded in Minneapolis on Saturday morning. Obstructing federal law enforcement and inciting violence against officers is wrong and illegal. This used to be a universally accepted position in the United States. Amid the hysteria, we must remember how we got here to this moment today and what this Democrat opposition is about. Former President Joe Biden and the Democrats opened America's borders for 4 years, inviting tens of millions of illegal aliens from all over the world to flood into our country. Among them, violent criminals who terrorized American communities and have inflicted devastating, permanent pain and harm on law-abiding Americans and their families. Yet we never saw outrage from Democrats or their allies in the liberal media over these horrifying crimes against U.S. citizens. The pain of American angel families was ignored and dismissed because it undermined the Democrat narrative. Innocent Americans like Jocelyn Nungray, Laken Riley, and Rachel Morin are just a few of the many victims savagely murdered by illegal alien criminals. Earlier this month, an illegal alien from Mexico with a long criminal history who came into our country under Joe Biden's administration threw a baseball-sized stone at a school bus carrying children in New Jersey and fractured the skull of an 8-year-old innocent child. President Trump promised accountability to these American families by securing the border, deporting every illegal alien who has committed crimes, especially and most importantly, violent crimes. Nearly 80 million Americans voted for him to deliver on that very promise, and he is. As the duly elected president, the president is fulfilling the will of the people by arresting and removing these threats from our country in cities from Los Angeles to New York and, yes, Minneapolis. Yet Democrat leaders in Minnesota with sanctuary city policies have actively defied federal immigration law and the will of the people. And as a result of that defiance, 2 Minnesotans have now tragically lost their lives on the streets of Tim Walz's state. It is President Trump's hope and wish and demand for the resistance and chaos to end today. That's why President Trump spoke with Governor Walz directly this morning, and he has outlined a clear and simple path to restoring law and order in Minnesota. Number 1, Governor Walz, Mayor Fry, and all Democrat leaders should turn over all criminal illegal aliens currently incarcerated in their prisons and jails to federal authorities, along with any illegal aliens with active warrants or known criminal histories for immediate deportation. Number 2, state and local law enforcement must agree to turn over all illegal aliens who are arrested by local police. And then thirdly, local police must assist federal law enforcement in apprehending and detaining illegal aliens who are wanted for crimes, especially violent crimes. If Governor Walz and Mayor Fry implement these common sense cooperative measures that I will add have already been implemented in nearly every single other state across the country, Customs and Border Patrol will not be needed to support ICE on the ground in Minnesota. ICE and local law enforcement can peacefully work together, as they are effectively doing in so many other states and jurisdictions. Additionally, President Trump is calling on the United States Congress to immediately pass legislation ending sanctuary cities once and for all. American cities should be safe sanctuaries for law-abiding citizens only, not for dangerous illegal alien criminals who broke our nation's laws and do not belong here. We hope Governor Walz will do the right thing and continue to work with President Trump to keep the American people safe following their call this morning. Americans overwhelmingly want exactly what President Trump is delivering: strong borders and strict immigration enforcement against the worst illegal aliens, of which there are still hundreds of thousands to deport from the interior of our country. The most peaceful way to carry out this vital public safety mission is for Republicans and Democrats to do it together, and for state and local law enforcement to work together with federal law enforcement. We want to let cops be cops. You wouldn't know this continues to be a very popular policy position from the biased media coverage over the course of the last few days, but polling shows huge support for this exact thing President Trump is calling for. More than 80% of Americans favor deporting illegal aliens convicted of violent crimes. A country unable to deport criminals who enter it illegally is no country at all. The open borders agenda of Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and the Democrats was already on the ballot on November 5th, 2024, and it was resoundingly rejected. President Trump will never back down from his promise to deport violent criminal illegal aliens and make America safe again, and he welcomes all cooperation in that effort. With that, I will answer your questions. And Jordan Conradson, why don't you kick us off today? Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Caroline. Jordan Conradson from Gateway Pundit. I have a few questions. First, with respect to the shooting in Minneapolis, we're seeing massive outrage from mainstream media and the left, but I'm just wondering, where was that outrage when Ashley Babbitt, an Air Force veteran, was executed by Capitol Police Officer Michael Byrd, who she posed no threat to in the U.S. Capitol?
Well, you raised a very important point, which I also believed I just raised as well in those opening remarks, in that there has no doubt been selective outrage by the liberal biased media in picking and choosing victims and highlighting their stories. And as I've said, President Trump does not want any Americans to lose their lives in the streets of America and in American communities across the country. He believes what happened on Saturday is a tragedy, but every life is equal to President Trump, and that's why the lives of Laken Riley and Jocelyn Nungray continue to matter to him and be an utmost priority to him to this very day. And it's unfortunate that we did not see the same type of sensationalist media coverage over the tragic deaths of those innocent American women and girls across the country as we are in the wake of this tragedy that took place on Saturday. Gabe. Sure, go ahead.
I want to get your response to this. The Arizona Attorney General, just days before this shooting in Minneapolis, she seemingly encouraged rioters to go out and shoot and kill ICE agents. And I'll quote her here. She said, "If you reasonably believe your life is in danger and you're in the house or in your car or on your property, you can defend yourself with lethal force." And she said that you can't tell if ICE agents are law enforcement or imposters, and it becomes an issue of whether you reasonably believe they were law enforcement. Do you have a response to that, and does the White House believe that she should be held accountable for these remarks?
Such dangerous rhetoric, as I pointed out, is exactly what has brought us to this position today, where you have elected Democrat officials across the country who are encouraging left-wing agitators and crazy people to go out and unlawfully obstruct lawful immigration enforcement. Again, these brave men and women of ICE and Border Patrol and the federal enforcement are just trying to do their jobs to enforce our nation's immigration laws and to go after the worst of the worst in this country. I would encourage everyone in this room, and I would encourage the Arizona Attorney General to look at the video of an ICE agent in Minneapolis. He was approached by left-wing agitators who were honking their horns and were screaming slurs at him, and he rolled down his window and he said, "What are you doing? I am out here trying to catch a child predator, somebody who has convicted crimes against an innocent child, and you are trying to obstruct me from doing my job." This rhetoric against ICE, comparing them to Nazi Gestapo, Donald Trump's police force, is despicable, it is shameful, and it is precisely what has led to the escalation of tensions in Minneapolis and in other places across the country. Gabe, go ahead.
Be looking into her for justifying violence?
I would defer you to the Department of Justice on that.
Thank you, Caroline.
Gabe.
Regarding Minnesota, on Saturday, the Department of Homeland Security posted that Preddy looks like he wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Stephen Miller on Saturday posted that, or called Preddy a would-be assassin. Why did administration officials jump to conclusions before an investigation had even been conducted?
Well, look, this has obviously been a very fluid and fast-moving situation throughout the weekend. As for President Trump, whom I speak for, he has said that he wants to let the investigation continue and let the facts lead in this case.
With regards to the deployment of Tom Homan to Minneapolis, should the deployment of Mr. Homan to Minneapolis be seen as a sign that the president is dissatisfied with how the officials on the ground had handled the incident?
No, Mr. Homan is doing an exceptional job, and he has been working with Secretary Noem and President Trump over the course of the last year. Secretary Noem still has the utmost confidence and trust of the President of the United States, and she's continuing to oversee the entire Department of Homeland Security and all of the immigration enforcement that's taking place across the whole entire country. Of course, Secretary Noem is also in charge of FEMA, and we are in the wake of a brutal winter storm where hundreds of thousands of Americans have been impacted by that. So Borders Are Homan is in a unique position to drop everything and go to Minnesota to continue having these productive conversations with state and local officials. And I know that he's catching a plane in just a few hours to do just that at the request of the president. Jennifer.
On Saturday's shooting, has the president been briefed, and have you been briefed on specific details of the shooting? How many shots were fired? How many guns discharged? And I mean, did the protesters' gun go off, or only the officers' guns? Do you have any of those details?
Again, the investigation is continuing, Jennifer, and we will let the facts lead and we will let the facts play out in this investigation. I do know that HSI and FBI are conducting interviews with those that were involved and the agents who were involved in this unfortunate tragedy on Saturday.
Are they keeping the president up to date on all those details?
The president is obviously very much on the ball with respect to this investigation. I think he's made that quite clear with the various statements that you've seen him put out, and also the 4 points that the president has outlined as well to Governor Walz, and to encourage him to cooperate with ICE and with the administration. Mary.
Thanks, Karoline. To follow on Gabe's question, Secretary Noem said Alex Preddy committed an act of domestic terrorism. Stephen Miller labeled Preddy a domestic terrorist. Does the president agree with them?
Look, as I've said, I have not heard the president characterize Mr. Preddy in that way. However, I have heard the president say he wants to let the facts in the investigation lead itself.
Was he alarmed to hear his top officials referring to him in that way, rushing to that judgment?
Danny, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. On Stephen Miller's comments, will Stephen Miller be apologising to the family of Alex Preddy for calling him, quotes, an assassin who tried to murder federal agents, despite the fact that, as you say, this is still under investigation?
Look, again, this incident remains under investigation, and nobody here at the White House, including the President of the United States, wants to see Americans hurt or killed and losing their lives in American streets. And we mourn for the parents. As a mother myself, of course, I cannot imagine the loss of life, especially losing one's child. And that same empathy from the President goes for the parents of angel families, parents of victims of illegal alien crime across our country as well, and that's exactly why the president continues to be wholeheartedly committed to deporting the worst of the worst criminals from our country. Why don't we go to the back? Kelly.
Does the president believe that the killing, though, was a mistake? Has he expressed that at all?
Again, the president has said, you know, we have to review it, and this investigation needs to continue, and he's letting the facts on the investigation lead itself.
Does he want the body camera footage to be released to the public? Now,
that's not something I've heard the president commit to, so I won't do that from the podium. Sure.
Caroline, how serious is the administration taking allegations that local and state officials in Minnesota are actively coordinating with demonstrators through encrypted or non-encrypted communications, as well as providing government resources to impede immigration enforcement operations?
I'm sorry, Carrie, could you repeat your question?
How serious is the administration taking allegations that local and state Minnesota officials are communicating with demonstrators to basically impede immigration officials?
Well, we've definitely seen active organization amongst these left-wing groups, Carrie, and it is something that I know the FBI and the Department of Justice are looking into. Again, it is illegal to unlawfully obstruct lawful immigration enforcement in this country, and these agitators are making it nearly impossible for ICE to do their jobs and for federal law enforcement to carry out the will of the American people to deport the worst of the worst. I would just encourage everyone to please imagine in this room, all of you come to the White House every day to report on the President of the United States and the administration. You come into this briefing room, you walk through the gates of the White House. Just imagine if there were left-wing agitators or agitators of any kind who were in your face, who were doxing you, who were harassing you, who were physically threatening you, who were biting off your fingers in the case of two Border Patrol agents we saw this past weekend in Minneapolis. That would make it very difficult for you to show up and do your job here at the White House every single day. That's what these officers in Minneapolis are facing. That's why the president is calling on Governor Walz and Mayor Frey for these 3 very simple and common sense points of cooperation so that ICE and local law enforcement can work together. Again, we are just asking for police to be police. And if you ask any law enforcement agent or official, they want to be able to work with their federal counterparts at the state and local level and vice versa.
Caroline. Thanks a lot, Caroline. 2 questions. One is looking forward. The role of Mr. Homan. Is he being sent by the president to diffuse the situation that exists right now on the ground? Is he the point person essentially for the White House in terms of trying to tamp down the tensions that exist right now in Minnesota?
Well, Mr. Homan is the point person for cooperating with state and local authorities and corresponding with them, again, to achieve this level of cooperation to subdue the chaos on the streets of Minneapolis. And I would just point out that Mr. Homan is someone who has been lauded for many, many decades for his experience working in law enforcement. In fact, this is a Washington Post headline from 9 years ago, 2016. Meet the man the White House has honored for deporting illegal immigrants. And I would remind everyone in this room that it was former President Barack Hussein Obama who awarded a medal to Mr. Homan. So he's obviously very qualified. He has the full trust and faith of the president. He will continue to have these meetings in the hopes that ICE and local law enforcement can cooperate and work together to have successful immigration enforcement, as we've seen in almost every other state across the country.
And secondly, Caroline, can you talk a little bit about tomorrow's trip by the president to Iowa, what the purpose of that trip is, what the goals of that trip are?
Sure, yes. Tomorrow, President Trump will be traveling to Des Moines, Iowa. He will be making a local visit at a local business, and then he will be giving a speech on affordability and on the economy. And I know he very much looks forward to being there, to meeting with the great people of Iowa, but also lawmakers as well. Jake.
Caroline, a couple quick questions. First, does the president remain fully confident in Kristi Noem's ability to lead the DHS?
Yes.
And then just secondly, just on that Wall Street Journal reporting that we saw yesterday, the president said at some point that the immigration enforcement officers would leave Minneapolis. Did the Saturday killing of Alex Preddy expedite that withdrawal at all?
To your first question, the answer is yes. He still has confidence and trust in Secretary Noem. To the second question, I would point you back to what I said earlier. If Governor Walz and Mayor Frey implement these common sense cooperative measures, CBP will no longer be needed to support ICE on the ground in Minnesota. ICE and local law enforcement will peacefully work together, as they are effectively doing in so many other states and jurisdictions, to remove violent criminals from American neighborhoods across the country.
Did Walz ask the president to remove the immigration enforcement officers?
He asked the president to scale down, and the president reiterated what the president put out in his statement yesterday and what I'm sharing with all of you as well. I would just add on this level of cooperation a few statistics that I think are very important. 7 of the top 10 safest cities in the United States cooperate with ICE. And we've seen historic turnaround in safety in cities that have chosen to cooperate with ICE, that are not just led by Republicans, but also look right here in Washington, D.C. We had a great level of cooperation with Mayor Bowser and the local government, and we have been able to remove thousands of illegal aliens from the District of Columbia, where you all live, so you can thank President Trump for that. The murder rate in Washington, D.C. has plummeted as a result. There were no riots, there were no protests, nobody was tragically killed as a result of that level of cooperation between federal and local authorities. And again, that's all the president is asking for in Minnesota. It's totally common sense. Jared, go ahead.
Thank you. Caroline, in this process, you continue to describe the situation in Minneapolis as chaos. Was there any mistake made by Secretary Noem that led the president to send Mr. Homan there?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. Did Secretary Noem make a mistake which led to...
she made any mistake that could lead the president to send Mr. Homan to Minneapolis?
No, as I already mentioned, Mr. Homan has been working alongside Secretary Noem and for the president over the course of the last year. And again, he's uniquely positioned to hop on a flight to Minnesota today to continue this correspondence with state and local authorities, and that's what he's going to be doing. Fran.
Karoline, is it the White House's position that Americans have the right to show up to these ICE operations and film, document, or protest the law enforcement actions?
All Americans have a First Amendment constitutional right, of course, but Americans do not have a constitutional right to impede and obstruct lawful immigration enforcement operations. That is actually a crime, and it's something that we've seen taking place in the streets of Minneapolis, which again is leading to these dangerous circumstances that these federal law enforcement officers have been forced to work within.
Back to the call with Governor Walz this morning, the president described it as respectful. He said we seem to be on a similar wavelength, but you had strong criticism for the governor and the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, just now. So could you explain the difference in tone between what the president had said in his True Social post and I think some of the criticisms that you just levied from the podium?
Fran, I think the criticisms that I laid out, I'm painting the picture for all of you in this room, are what led to the moment that we are in today, where Governor Walz and President Trump are having a conversation, a constructive and productive conversation to end the chaos and the lawlessness that has taken place in Governor Walz's state. Elena.
Thank you. I had a question. With Homan now going to Minnesota, is Gregory Bovino also going to remain in Minnesota overseeing these ICE operations?
Mr. Bovino is a wonderful man, and he's a great professional. He is going to very much continue to lead Customs and Border Patrol throughout and across the country. Mr. Homan will be the main point of contact on the ground in Minneapolis.
And to follow up, given what we've heard from several Trump administration officials, people like Stephen Miller, as people point out, calling him a domestic terrorist, Bovino saying that Preddy was out to massacre law enforcement. Why not require ICE agents to wear body cameras to clear up some of the disputes that we are hearing from witnesses and video footage versus what the administration has been saying?
Well, that's a policy question that I know the policy folks in the building are having with members on Capitol Hill, and I'll leave it to them and the president to make that decision.
And I just have a final question is on, you were talking about the level of cooperation that the president talked about with Governor Walz. Will the administration commit to cooperating with local officials on this investigation into Alex Preddy?
The president spoke about this with Governor Walz and said he would have a discussion about it. He did not make a commitment, and so therefore I won't make that commitment here. I would just remind all of you in the media, because I've seen a lack of reporting on this fact, there are investigations into what took place on Saturday. The Homeland Security investigations and the FBI have teamed up for an investigation, and there's also an internal CBP investigation, an internal review of what is happening on the ground in Minnesota. The president supports those investigations, and as I've said repeatedly, he wants to see them move forward. Phil.
FBI Director Kash Patel said in a Sunday interview, quote, "You cannot bring a firearm loaded with multiple magazines to any sort of protest." Does the president believe the Second Amendment rights remain in effect even when protesting?
The president supports the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding American citizens, absolutely. There has been no greater supporter or defender of the right to bear arms than President Donald J. Trump. So while Americans have a constitutional right to bear arms, Americans do not have a constitutional right to impede lawful immigration enforcement operations. And any gun owner knows that when you are carrying a weapon, when you are bearing arms, and you are confronted by law enforcement, you are raising the assumption of risk and the risk of force being used against you. And again, that's unfortunately what took place on Saturday.
Will his mission continue to be focusing on illegal immigrants with a criminal history, or will it be on illegal immigration generally?
Mr. Homan will continue to enforce our nation's immigration laws, especially deporting the worst of the worst criminals in Minnesota who have committed violent offenses. And I would just remind all of you that this important work is continuing to be carried out. In just the last few days, I'm happy to provide this packet to anyone in the room. ICE has arrested multiple violent criminals, illegal aliens within Minnesota. Many of them have convictions for assault, driving under the influence, fraud. This individual here I'm looking at was an aggravated felon with multiple convictions for larceny, fraud, and forgery of checks, vehicle theft, drug possession, domestic assault, inflicting bodily harm on another, criminal convictions of larceny, identity theft, again, charged with driving under the influence. These are extremely dangerous people who Governor Walz and Mayor Fry have allowed to roam on their streets, and all the president is asking for is cooperation to arrest individuals like this and deport them from the United States of America. I'll take a couple more. Go ahead.
Okay, so this weekend the president posted that this is a cover-up of the fraud in the state of Minnesota. He also posted Minnesota is a cover-up. These both happened after the shooting. So given that these came after the shooting, what is the this here? What is the cover-up he's alleging?
Yes, it's a good question. I've spoken with the president about this at length. What the president is referring to is the fact that you have Governor Walz and, again, the mayor, who have been encouraging these left-wing agitators to come out and to harass and to dox and to threaten ICE and to make this conversation about and smear lies about federal law enforcement who, again, are just trying to do their jobs in an attempt to distract from the widespread, massive fraud that has taken place in their state. Billions and billions of dollars has been stolen from law-abiding taxpayers in Minnesota, and the administration continues to be very focused on getting to the bottom of it, and especially, and the president raised a good question over the weekend, with respect to Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who now has a net worth within the millions, and one must ask themselves, why and how is that possible? Is she connected to the fraud rings that we have seen taking place within her state and her own district? It's a question the American people are raising, and the president believes it's one worth answering. Haley.
Thanks, Caroline. I want to go back to some of the comments from Stephen Miller and Secretary Noem. You've made clear the president wants to see the investigation play out when answering some of the questions on the specific details. Is he concerned that some of those definitive statements made by other officials risks public perception of the credibility of those investigations now playing out?
Again, the president believes that these investigations are credible, they are continuing, they are active, and he wants to let them play out. Alex.
Caroline, thank you. Is the administration willing to separate DHS funding from other funding bills in order to avoid a broader shutdown?
Look, at this point, the White House supports the bipartisan work that was done to advance the bipartisan appropriations package, and we want to see that passed. Policy discussions on immigration in Minnesota are happening. Look, the president is leading those discussions, as evidenced by his correspondence with Governor Walz this morning, but that should not be at the expense of government funding for the American people, which would include, as you know, Alex, FEMA funding, and we are in the midst of the storm that took place over the weekend, and many Americans are still being impacted by that. So we absolutely do not want to see that funding lapse, and we want the Senate to move forward with passing the bipartisan appropriations package that was negotiated on a bipartisan basis.
And secondly, there's another round of Russia-Ukraine talks this weekend, Sunday. I wonder if you can walk us through with the president, how he'll be involved in that, if at all. We'll be talking to President Putin, President Zelensky ahead of those meetings.
I'm not tracking any scheduled calls at this point in time. However, the president remains deeply involved, and of course he's being apprised by his advisors, namely Jared Kushner and Special Envoy Witkoff, on these talks. They had a multilateral meeting this past weekend, which didn't get a ton of coverage, but that was historic in nature, where the president's team has really brought two sides of this war to the table together to move the ball closer towards peace. So the president is not giving up on the peace process. He obviously just met with President Zelensky when we were in Davos, Switzerland, but I'm not tracking any calls scheduled for this week. On one more foreign policy point, I will point out, as you all saw, the last remaining body of the hostages, Israeli hostages in Gaza, has been returned. This is a huge foreign policy feat for the President of the United States, for the State of Israel, and frankly for the whole world. The President made the impossible possible, and so it's great news for the President, for the United States, for our allies, and also for peace in the Middle East. And I understand that more than 20 new additional countries have also signed up to join the newly established Board of Peace with respect to the rebuilding of Gaza, which is another historic accomplishment for this president. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you in Iowa tomorrow.
And some important topics there from Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt on this Monday, January 26. 40 years ago today, Chicago Bears hoisted that trophy, Super Bowl 20, and completely obliterated the New England Patriots. And I wish that was being repeated come February 8th for Super Bowl 60, but at least the Patriots will be there to attempt to reclaim at glory. Of course, visit kalshi.com/RSBN for all of those predictions. Also to mention before we leave you today, the March for Life was in Washington, D.C. on Friday. And when you want to actually talk about a peaceful protest, hundreds of thousands there, braving this winter storm to go there and cheer it on. The vice president there in person, Speaker of the House, and his moving story, but also countless policymakers, those in religious life, and those students who went out there marching, including a certain Pope Leo, who back in the 70s when he was a college student, out there making the march against Roe v. Wade, which was overturned by the Dobbs decision. And Jess Brown's burger sharing on social media, while the media focused on protests, 100,000 people quietly showed up to defend the most voiceless among us. No chaos, no destruction, just families, students, grandparents, children walking together with one simple message, that life matters. It doesn't fit the narrative, so it rarely gets the spotlight, but it should. And it was good to see some media colleagues doing just that. But because this is what the real conviction looks like, peaceful, united, unapologetic, they'll show you anger, they'll show you division, they'll show you conflict. That's why they call it programming and channeling. Think about those terms for a moment. But they won't always show you hope. And they won't show you the thousands who gather not to tear something down, but to protect something sacred. A movement that doesn't scream still speaks. A crowd that doesn't riot still makes history. As so much of that history happening in the month of January throughout 250 years of this extraordinary country. In fact, that Battle of Ticonderoga, January 25th, 1776, leading to the freedom we now enjoy today, and that was a blistery cold time as well. For all my colleagues here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, you have yourself a wonderful Monday, and we will be with you here throughout the week. President Trump scheduled to visit Clive, Iowa tomorrow, just outside of Des Moines, as he's taking it to the streets and talking to America about this America 250, not only celebrating the birthday, but a domestic policy accompanied with an international policy that is bringing down gas prices, grocery prices, and ultimately perhaps housing prices as we look towards the future and the midterms this year. For all my colleagues here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, I'm Robert McNeely. God be with you. Be safe, stay warm, and we'll see you again very soon.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interviewed the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live. Look, don't forget to watch my show right here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. It's imperative that you do so, okay? Bye-bye.
allfamilypharmacy.com/RSBN. You can scan that QR code now, RSBN10. That is the code, easy to remember, for 10% off. This is ivermectin, hydrochloroquine, antibiotics that will save you and yours from bacterial and viral infections, NAD+, and much, much more. 200 essential medications and emergency medical kits, the meds you trust delivered to your door.